Welcome. This is the first one for the year. It is awesome weather, finally becoming fall, and we know a lot of you may have events and homecomings and things to get back to, so we're going to try and keep us on. Ours is next week. Yeah, but it's not homecoming. So, all right, we do have a couple of announcements from ASCD, so I'm just going to.
Okay, good morning. Some of you, may have came to the pre-session that we had today that was really targeted to new curriculum leaders for the state. We had a really good showing, 27 people. So if there's 27 new people, that's awesome. And if some of you are returning, we love that returning people attended that session as well. We're actually going to host a full day training later this semester. We're going to send out a link over the listserv. It is free. We do ask that you potentially would add a membership of KSCD onto your yearly USA membership, but that's not required. So if you don't have it, that's okay. You're still welcome. So we will send that link out. It is a Google Doc. All you have to do is fill out your name, your school district, and some topics you'd like us to discuss. It will be a workshop base where we will present information. You'll have a chance to work on it. We'll give you some feedback. You can collaborate and move on to the next topic. So it will not be a sit and get where we talk, and you don't get a chance to work. So please know that if you have some people in your district that you think would benefit to come with you, make sure you register them down too so we know what type of size of room you need. We're very excited that we had the individuals this morning. We look forward to continuing to serve you all.
All right, so if you are a new curriculum director, or that may not be your title, but you were given the responsibility anyway, raise your hand. Okay. Are there door prizes? So keep your hands up because I needed kind of a visual here. Some of you aren't holding it very high. So we're going to have you introduce yourself, the school district you're at, and I'll run the mic around.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Melissa Bruner from Harrington, USD 487.
Stacy Giebler, Elementary Curriculum Director, Shawnee Heights.
And Stacy Bell, Secondary Curriculum Director at Shawnee Heights.
You guys can change the whole district just right here, over here.
Good morning, Matthew Anderson, Kansas City, Kansas Public Schools, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Lisa Braun, Oskaloosa, USD 341, Go Bears, and I'm the Assistant Principal, K-12, and everything else that they've given me.
Janice Bone, Curriculum Director of 505 Chautauqua St. Paul.
I'm working my way across.
Tiffany Snyder, Salina Public Schools, Curriculum Director.
I know there's some other, you got to put your hand back up.
Brandy McWilliams, McPherson, Director of Curriculum Instruction.
Curriculum and Assessment Coordinator, Shanae Stein from Hayesville, 261.
Glenda LaBarbera, Assistant Superintendent, Garden City, 457.
Melanie Days, Curriculum and Assessment Coordinator, Goodland, USD 352.
Catherine Whitcomb, Instructional Coach and Curriculum Director at USD 252.
Noah Slay, Curriculum Director at Royal Valley Public Schools.
Oh. My hero.
Adeline Solner, Executive Director of Academic Affairs, Valley Center.
You make me walk all the way back across? I was just over there. Oh, fries are done.
Bill Losey, Director, Student Learning, Hugoton, USD 210.
All right, we got them all? Well, welcome to this esteemed group. We try to come together 3 times a year. 3 times a year just to spend the day and try and get questions answered, provide you updates that we think that are relevant and that you're going to need. And we appreciate the leadership from the association that helps kind of give us information on what they believe is pertinent for you. I am now going to turn it over to our distinguished leader, Dr. Watson, and I'm just going to turn it over.
Hey, how you doing? So I was, Brad does have a big game tonight. We call it, the game of the week. But then, Cindy, I was looking at you got a big game tonight too. So, yeah, your game of the everyone's a game of the week, unless you're not the game of the week, right? So, really, Brad just wanted to do all the new people so he could get his steps in on his Fitbit this morning. So we're happy that you're able to do that. So good to see all of you. Really good crowd for a Friday, and we're glad that you came out. And I was just telling Teresa, I went to the very first curriculum leaders that when it formed, and so this is those of you that have been doing this work quite a while know this is my work. This is really how I still think about it. I still really view myself as a teacher and really involved in instruction. And so there's a lot of people, going to share lots of things. So for the new people or maybe some of the superintendents that, are just coming to get a little bit more information, this is a great place, not so much, while it is a great place for our people to disseminate a lot of information and then do Q&A and get feedback, you get to learn from people that think about instruction and curriculum design all the time and what's going on in various communities from small to large. And we were just out in southwest Kansas this week. I think it was this week. The weeks run together. Just seeing some remarkable things being done as it relates to curriculum instruction and really trying to do this work of helping every kid be successful. And it's really so much fun to see. So I think all of you know that I want to talk to you this morning about a window of opportunity that presented itself, and I want to kind of give you the history of that, to make a decision on whether or not we would like to use the ACT and the ACT work keys as part of our state assessment. And it really is that. It's a chance to give input, and it's a window of opportunity. Brad and Beth and I, there's no decision been made. We continue to be amazed about the misinformation that's out about this. We really are seeking input, and we're going to do that today. But here's kind of where we are. And the good thing is Brad and Beth and Scott are here. They're much more knowledgeable about the in-depth process of this than I am. But so let's put that in big letters. If we do this, all right, it would only replace the 10th grade high school state assessment. So someone said to me this week, well, so we're talking about Aspire. No, we're not talking about Aspire. We're talking about the 10th grade English language arts, mathematics, and science state assessment, and possibly using ACT and ACT work keys in its place. So that's what you're giving feedback on. And Beth will correct me whenever I hit something wrong. All right, so we're only talking about that replacement if we decide to do it. All right. So we're seeking input from superintendents. We already got theirs. We're seeking input from special ed directors. We already have theirs. Some of you are in the room. You get to vote again. That's really cool. And we told them both. I think Bert told special ed. I certainly told Soups. We're going to talk to the curriculum people, and if you want them to vote in a certain way, you may want to tell them. Otherwise, you can vote any way that you want. All right, so we're seeking input from those from those people. Why are we even doing this? Why are we asking for your input? Well, Beth came to Brad and I a few months ago and said, you know, if you haven't noticed, Donald Trump, the president, doesn't seem to care about education. I'm editorializing. Beth didn't say this at all. But have you ever heard him talk about education? Ukraine, maybe? Okay, but not education. And so Betsy DeVos is running around with nothing to do. In that vacuum, I think this is a positive. States are being allowed to do what they want to do primarily through ESSA accountability. That can be a good thing or a bad thing depending on how you look at it. We take that very serious. We take our accountability to have the success of each child very serious. And I know that some people at the federal level believe that if we don't have strong oversight, some states will not take that very serious. But with that, for the first time, wasn't allowed before, the U.S. Department of Ed said to states, if you want to use the ACT or the SAT or one of these college admissions as your state assessment, we're going to approve it. That had never happened. Okay? So there's the first window. Then, Governor Kelly came into office. You may have noticed that. And she said, we're going to have transparency in government. And every government contract, state government contract, must, not maybe, must go out to RFP. Go out for a request for proposal and go out to bid. Now, those of you that know Dale, that's what she said, and it must. So Dale's like, we might have to do this. So we sat on it a while, and we eventually had a meeting with her staff just in the last couple months, and they said, yes, despite having used KU for our assessments since about 1980 with no bid, you must bid it. Beth, you're going to get something to do for the next several months. We have to write an RFP for a state assessment. So you can play all the scenarios out on that. Will we get KU? Don't know. We think we will. Will it go up in price? Don't know. Who knows, right? But we have to write that. And it has to be written around November because this is a 6-month process, and we have to give a state assessment in 2021 or the feds take our money away. So that's no good. So we've got it, everything's ready for 20. We're not talking about this year. We're talking about the school year 2021, the spring of 21. But we have to get started on that because let me just tell you, and Beth can, if you want to just sit over lunch and have a conversation, this is a long process. This is bureaucracy at its best. Those of you who think that you have some bureaucracy, this is a long, you have to go through a lot of things. Attorneys have to look at it, Department of Administration. So we have to do this. The board would have to approve an RFP. That's got to be done. Beth would have said last month, I got to get on this. No, we're going to do it in November. So you see the window? So I've had people say, why are we rushing this decision? Let's think about it a few years. Well, we don't have a few years to get your input. So those are the two things that have come together. U.S. Department of Ed says, if you want to do it, you can do it. We need to go out to an RFP. Does that RFP include, a 10th grade assessment or a high school assessment or not? And did you notice last year the state started paying for ACT and ACT worksheets? So that part financially has been done. Does that make sense? When we set up the budget for that, we did something different than we did with the Career and Tech Ed. We still call it Senate Bill 155, which, as you know, there was just a bucket of money, and we quickly ran out of the money, right? And then we started prorating. So when we went in and got the ACT and the work keys, we costed that out in a budget as if every student in the state would take both. knowing that they probably wouldn't, but the budget's there. So if we ever moved it to a state assessment, the money's there. Does that make sense? But that wasn't our intention. Our intention was keep it a volunteer system. So think about it. U.S. Department of Ed, yeah, you can do it. Beth, I got to write an RFP. Randy, do we include a 10th grade or not? Because sometimes some of you come up and say, why don't we just use this ACT? Why do we keep, no one takes the 10th grade state assessment serious. If I had a nickel for every time someone's told me that high school kids don't take the 10th grade state assessment serious, I'd be a wealthy guy. All right? And then the state's paying for both assessments. So, before you do this, that's why I'm asking your input. Should we drop the 10th grade state assessment and replace it with a combination? ACT itself in English language arts, reading, mathematics, science, and work keys. I want to be clear. The feds, on the Fed side, will only take the ACT. So if you're a focus or not, if you're a comprehensive support school, I'll get my terminology, I think, right? That's you're involved in federal accountability. Most of you in the room don't pay attention to that very much. The state board says for accreditation we would want both because we think that balance is good. All right, so I'm putting out to you why it would be a combination. Those are approximately 3-hour exams. So you could technically, you could do one in the morning, one in the afternoon. Most of you would do one day and one the other day. And if we do that, the contract, just like it does now, state contract, is you're going to do it on some day with a makeup day because that's the protocol. Special ed comes up a lot. Bert's been talking. We went to SEAC. We've talked to special ed directors. ACT has a list of acceptable accommodations. Most of that is extended time. You can take the states that do it for their assessment. You can have as many accommodations as you want. We could write that in. But at some point, ACT would say, that's fine. You can't use that test now to go to KU because it's not standardized enough. The tricky part there, if we go there, and we're perfectly fine, is, Penny, you would have to make sure in Nickerson you would inform parents, if we give this set of accommodations, you're not going to be able to send that off as a college admission exam. It could be used for a state assessment. Does that make sense? If you use the standard ACT assessments, which many of you did last year when it was for free and optional, you would do that same process. So I think special ed gets brought up a lot. We are just here seeking input. All right? We really don't care one way or the other. I got a nice email this morning. Brad probably got it too. I don't know why you guys want to do this. I'm trying to tell you why we're asking you if you want to do this. But I will be right up front with you. Whatever we do, all right, 6 months from now, 8 months from now, whatever we do, don't come to me and tell me kids aren't taking whatever assessment we're doing serious. That will be your fault. All right? And it shouldn't be a teach to the test. You've heard me say that. But it should be a measure of academic readiness. That's what it measures. Are you academically ready? It doesn't say you're ready to get up early in the morning and go to class on time. But it says, are you academically ready in those? I also want to say this, because we've had people say, why would we have every kid take a college admissions exam? Doesn't that go against kind of the philosophy of Kansas Can? Yes, the bouquet would have been great. For those of you that remember, the feds won't buy us a kid taking ASVAB that's going to the military, a kid taking work keys that's going to worker tech, a kid taking ACT or AC. We would love to do that and have that. The feds say you must take the same test, the same year, same time. Every kid outside the 1% that takes the DLM. Our state assessment was written, the standards and the cut scores by Kansas educators, and many of you in here were a part of those norming process. You set that bar extremely high. So I'm just going to talk about the 10th grade. We know this because we've done the correlational studies now 3 years in a row. If you score in levels 3 and 4, which is, by the way, what we've told the federal government you're going to do over time with every kid, that equates to, in mathematics, being at a level of 22 on the ACT. It equates in reading on the ACT to be at a 24. And it's much higher than being at an 18 in English on the ACT. You actually can be about in mid-level 2. And every kid must take that now. Am I making sense? I mean, you can't opt out of that. So this is an opportunity for you to give us feedback. Next week, 2 weeks, I will go to the state board, and I'm going to share with them all the feedback that Bert collected, that we talked at SEAC, that Brad and I've collected with superintendents and the conversations we've had and the conversations here. And then we will make a determination for Beth as to what to put in the RFP for 21. All right, what questions do you have about giving feedback? And by the way, part of the feedback can be, I don't know and I don't care. Okay, so we give you that out, all right? Yes. Yes?
My question would be, this would now no longer be directly correlated to the state standards that we've adopted for 10th grade. How would that look to direct our assessment to our instruction and make sure the data's not dirty?
Yeah, excellent. And boy, if a curriculum person didn't ask that question, I'd be upset. So we've got, Melissa's here, and we've got other people here that can answer that specific. Let me give you a very general answer. 10th grade state assessments are written, as you know, and this is true of 8th and 3rd, for a grade level standard at that grade. ACT is written for the scope of high school. So by itself, it doesn't limit to 10th grade. For example, I don't think, Melissa, we have any trigonometry test items, do we? Trigonometry? ACT would, right? Because they would expect in the junior, senior year that you're in more advanced math than you are at 10th grade. So that, right off the bat, is a difference. I don't know how closely aligned the ACT standards and the work keys, let's throw those out, are to our standards or vice versa. I would guess in science would be the biggest mismatch, because the next gen science standards and the ACT test is primarily a reading and look at a chart. You don't really have to know much science. You have to analyze charts. And build models. So I think that's the biggest mismatch. So I think that's a valid concern. For if we're going to the standards at the high school, that can be a valid concern. Yes. Yeah. Beth.
So the reason the U.S. Department of Ed approved the ACT or SAT for the state assessment in high school is because ACT and SAT were able to demonstrate sufficient alignment to the Common Core. Okay, so I understand we don't have Common Core standards, but there's overlap with Common Core still. So we believe we would have to go through an alignment study. That would be part of the process of actually, getting federal approval, because even though they've approved it in these other states, we would have to go there with all of our evidence to document that. But ACT is comfortable after reviewing our standards that there would be enough of a mesh that it would work. And what I will also say is that neither test is going to test every standard that we have. So you have to make choices.
Yeah. Right. Yes. Yes. Question is who would take? So right now, 99% of students, we require 95, take the 10th grade state assessments in English language arts, mathematics, and then 11th graders take it in science. We can keep that just like it is with, you know, the cycle of change and modification. We can move those out, and then 11th graders would take the ACT and the ACT work keys. Everyone would take both. 95% participation, all those same requirements. So generally 99% and the 1% on DLM would not. We would take it with accommodations and we would write those. Or we don't. We keep it optional for any kid. We're at about 80% right now that take it voluntarily. But does that help? 10th, 11th grade are our state assessments right now in those two areas. This would all move to 11th. The feds basically say you have to test once in high school. So we have flexibility on that. By the way, I should say this. The state also provides at no cost to you that starting this year, the pre-ACT as an optional assessment for any kid. That would stay. All of this would stay. If we stay at the state assessment as is, that's still going to stay as an option for any student.
Okay, can you talk to us a little bit about the fact that the ACT is a normed reference test and the cut scores would change after 3 years?
It's not a norm reference test.
Okay. Talk to me about the cut scores and how they move.
They don't move.
Okay.
Now, we would set state cut scores as where we want the state level to be. If you're talking about the college admission, they convert and they'll say you did better than X amount of kids in the country. But it is a standards-based assessment, and their cut score is derived as empirically what should be the cut score on. Can every kid get a 21 in theory? Yes. Now, do they adjust from time to time? Yes, so do we, right? In fact, Beth knows in English language arts, we're going to have to adjust because we're way too rigorous in setting those cut scores. So at some cycle, we're going to have to adjust that. But it is not, like, remember the old ITBS? Where you're at the 50, half the kids in the country did better and half the, ACT is not normed as I would define a norm reference test. It tells you that, it'll give you that, but it is a test that measures their standards of college readiness. Does that help? Okay. Yes.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good to see you.
Good to see you
We haven't
again.
seen each other for a while.
4 or 5 days.
I know.
My question is, a few years ago, we were looking at Smarter Balanced as our assessment. We got very excited about it. We put in a lot of work and a lot of time, and then the state board did not vote for Smarter Balanced, and all of that was gone. So kind of what would be the timeline? I mean, I'm totally willing to do the work. It's just it was really disappointing to do all the work and then have them say, nope, that's not what we're doing. So I just kind of wondered what the timeline might be.
If we do this, what's the timeline? Well, Beth would write the RFP. The state board would have to vote yes. Beth would write the RFP. We'd get the RFP back. The RFP would not have a high school assessment in it. We would then start on a separate. I'm looking at Beth and Scott here. We'd start a separate kind of getting people together. Where are we going to set the cut scores and everything for 21? How do we combine for the state level, the work keys and the ACT and some kind of blended? All that would be Kansas people doing that. And we'd have to have that set prior to not prior to giving it, but probably soon after in the fall of 21, before we release it back to the field and test. Yeah, so the state board would have to approve it before we ever did all the work.
One thing to add to that is we would have to also go to the legislature and have them change one piece of the law, which is we also accredit private schools that choose to be accredited, and we have a lot of them that do. The law right now says it's free for public. we would have to have the legislature change the statute to say free to public and any accredited private, so they could give it, because if we're using it for federal accountability, we have to have it available for the privates as well.
Yeah, right now, for example, Capon High School is not allowed to access the free money for their kids to take it. If we go this way, they have to take it because it's state assessment. So Brad's right. We'd have to tweak that a little bit. By the way, though, the money, I want to come back to the money. The money that we appropriated can handle, again, every student taking it. So that's was the biggest hurdle. These are great questions. Yeah, Wade.
I'm making an assumption that the assessment that when we give it to the juniors or whenever we give it, that's the only score that counts. If a kid takes the test multiple times, does the best score count?
Yeah, that same, just like it works now. So, you know, if a kid takes the ACT 5 times and applies to Stanford, Stanford's going to super scale that, take their best sub-score. Every college does that different. This is just for the federal accountability. So all the college admissions stuff would still work the same way.
Okay. I've also heard, and I don't know if this is true, that if a kid takes a 9 or a 12-week ACT prep class, their average score can go up 4-6 points. So is there any concern with the concept of we're just teaching to a test then? Has that been talked about in that sense?
It's multi-level for me in answering this. You know that there's not anyone in this agency, nor on the state board, that wants anyone in a school to teach to a test at the exclusion of we want you to teach to the standards. We want you to really make sure kids know standards, but not teach the old delta indicators. We also know, though, so I'm going to layer that with, we know that in our most affluent communities, test prep to try to raise an ACT score is extremely competitive and demanded of students. I think those worlds would collide a little bit. One of the fears I would have is in higher poverty areas, let's use KCK, would those kids get the same access that they would in McPherson if McPherson's providing test prep for every kid? I'm making this up a little bit. And what happens on the kids that take it multiple times? They get an advantage. But so that's a concern. I would say that happens now. What we're looking at here is a federal accountability piece, which is such a small piece of the overall assessment picture, but it is an important piece. So it's replacing a federal accountability piece. If we don't replace it, it will continue to happen just like it is now. Does that help? Because I think you're right.
It does help a little bit. Lot to think about with it, but one other consideration for Emporia specifically is we have a trimester schedule. And so we have students who haven't taken a junior level math class yet by the time we're given the assessment or haven't finished the curriculum. So for us, it might actually drive or impact the way we schedule. And with redesign, then that is also a consideration. So it could impact what we're doing in that sense. And
Excellent.
Maybe not be fair.
I might add to that while Beth is, well, no, you're smarter than me, so I'm going to let you go first.
Okay.
I yield.
So ACT has multiple state assessment dates, and when we went to the voluntary state assessment, the preference was not to interfere with the state assessment window. So that's why ACT is in February. If we have choices, that date isn't fixed in stone. We can push it later in the semester if it replaces state assessment, because then you're not in the window of having to give the state assessment to all the other students. But so that's why the decision was made the way it was.
And also, we don't know this, but this is something we would ask. What if a kid his sophomore year knocks out a 32 Do they have to take it when they're a junior if they're already and we bank it? Those are all details that if that was, then those are things that we would want to try and negotiate in a contract and figure out. We just can't get into that because we don't know those things. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And that's why there's pros and cons to this conversations, and we just want your input before Randy goes to the board, because here's one thing we do know. When states pay for the ACT, within about 3 years, those states are over 90 to 95% of their kids are taking it once it's free. We were at 80. If we're like a lot of the other states, we will most likely get to 90, 95 within a few years. So the only question is, would you want to then use that for federal accountability, or do we want to keep both? And that's kind of
because one of the balance too. These are great. And this is why we want your input. One of the balances is that we hear sometimes we test too much. I always smile at that because I think you guys test a lot more than we require you to test. But teachers say we're testing too much, and so do we want to reduce the footprint? You know, that's another side of this too.
Can you clarify on the ACT work keys? Every kid would take that too,
yes.
Right? The local universities like Washburn Tech won't take those scores. They want the AccuPlacer. So what is in it for our students to take the work keys when then they still have to take the AccuPlacer to go to places like Washburn Tech?
Great question. Washburn Tech made a decision a couple years ago to shift that, because if those of you who know Washburn Tech, that they used to take that. So let me tell you right now, for that specific, there are a handful of counties in Kansas that are work-ready counties, where if you go apply for a job in that county, you have to take the work keys assessment or produce that score, or you can't be interviewed. Crawford, Cherokee, Potawatomi, McPherson, they're a handful. So that would be one, and there are more in that process. I know Anderson County is looking at that right now. So that's one. This other part that I can't guarantee anything is KBOR, just dropped qualified admissions from the courses. And we have now, we're putting back together a coordinating council of business, KBOR, and our state board. And one of the topics will be the use of work keys as it relates to employment and technical non-4-year schools. I think there's a tremendous support on the KBOR level to look at that. That doesn't change tomorrow, doesn't change Washburn Tech decision right now, but I think that will be part of the discussion either way. So, all right, going forward, because if the state continues to pay for it, why aren't we using that and then making someone pay or at least jump through another test with AccuPlacer? So again, whether we do this or keep it optional. We went to option, remember, because we wanted the opportunity to capture kids that may not take it, that could go on. And we already found that to be true, especially in the Wichita area. Yes? Help make sure we're clear.
Well,
Would you?
I want to make sure I'm understanding. Something Brad said, I just want to make sure. Are we talking about potentially shifting this to the junior level, or are we planning to give these two assessments still at the 10th grade level?
We would shift it to the junior level.
To the junior level. Okay, that's question number one.
And science is given there now.
Okay, right.
But the language arts and math would move to the junior level with it.
Okay, and then the other clarification I just need to track and make sure I'm with you on is, I understand we'll give both ACT and work keys to all students. The feds only look at the ACT portion, but you mentioned then for the state assessment purposes, we could potentially have some kind of a combination. Any thought on how that might be determined per student?
I can tell you how it will be determined. A group of you and a group of teachers will set those scores. We'll look at that. We'll bring ACT in the room if we do it. and say, for example, if you notice on Work Keys or ACT, it does a prediction to the other one now. So it says, you know, we would predict you to be at gold level on Work Keys, but we will tighten that up, and you will actually say, if a kid scores X on Work Keys and X on ACT, it's equatable to this as it relates to our KESA accountability. That will be a Kansas thing. You know, Nebraska did this by legislative action. I love that we're going to wrestle with this and do it or not do it based upon us. You know, I say this all the time, and you know I say this. All education is within the family. The family is going to make this decision. You know, the state board will, but I mean, I love this about Kansas. You know, these are not right or wrong. These are, how does this affect my district and my kids and how I feel about it, and all that wrapped up into one.
I know that we currently have, you know, pre-ACT for 9th grade. Just, it's a predictive way to figure out how students are going to do on the ACT assessment. Do you foresee, if we would move forward with this, would we also open it up to 8th grade, so then that way it could open us up to curricular decisions, like what students need to take in order to be successful on the ACT?
We have not had any discussions about that. Could there be? Maybe, but we've just not had any discussions pro or con to that right now. It's so, those of you who follow that whole evolution of ACT, so funny. You know, because a gazillion years ago, it was pre-ACT, right, and ACT. Drop that. We're going to go with explore and plan. Oh, drop that. We're not going to do. We're going to go with aspire, and now it's all come full circle. At least in my lifetime. Now we call it pre-ACT again, which it was in 1988. So these are great. Michelle Miller.
Beth, could you talk just a little bit more about that criterion and norm referenced piece and what this is compared to what ACT is?
Okay, I'll do it. A criterion referenced assessment has a set of criteria. This is state assessment of which you measure against. A norm reference measures you against all the other people taking the assessment. ACT does not do that. It measures against a set standard. So again, everyone in theory could hit 21. Now every 7 years, I believe, or 9 years, they go through a norming process, just like we do at the state assessments, and they may adjust that, but in theory, everyone can score at that level. It's not that some 50% are going to be lower, 50% are going to be lower. Thank you. Yeah, they do. Okay. Thank you. Not.
You're confusing an ACT college entrance, right? That the universities are going to make that decision, and ACT is going to have a recommendation, whether it's 21, 23, whatever, right? To what our state assessment cut scores would be for proficient from a state's perspective. Okay, so we will take all the data from the ACT, we'll bring it together just like we did when we set cut scores for every one of our other grade levels, and we will look at it. We will have all the data. If the state average is, I'm going to throw it out there, if the state average is 19, we're not going to set a cut score at 23, right? We're going to look at all the data. We're going to look at how closely aligned it is to the standards and what we would expect our students to do. Now, the one advantage we have in this whole process, that was kind of a game changer for me, is that Dr. Mary Ann Perry is the expert in the field right now on how to do that in states. And she's successfully worked with Oklahoma on the ACT and SAT both. She's worked with Wisconsin on the ACT, and they have nothing but praise for the process that she took them through. I can't tell you that process today, other than I have listened to it. I have listened to ACT and SAT respond to her work, and I have talked to the other states. And I'm confident that we would come to a proficient expectation that would be relative to our state expectations, and we wouldn't be linking to some college readiness like we do right now with our current state assessment.
And I will tell you, as a state and as a district, if you go from 75% to 99%, at that time, we will have to recalibrate.
And people
we
like
know
Brad
that.
and I have to take the test.
That's a new baseline.
Goes down.
Because you are now testing 99, just like when we went from the old state assessment where proficient was at level 3 to the new state. Your percents didn't mean kids weren't as smart. We just raised the bar, so we had to recalibrate.
But I want to say two things around that. Right now at the 10th grade assessment, we know that those same kids are scoring at levels 1 and 2. Because if you're in 3 and 4, it's equatable to those cut scores for college ready. It just is. We know that. Second is, from the policy standpoint, scores will go down. I've been in a superintendent where that happened. I can withstand it being a commissioner if you decide we want to do that or that happens. That should not, in my opinion, be the determining factor as whether you want to do it or not. This ought to be, is this a good policy to go forward? Not that our scores will fall. They will. That's just a reality because you're going to take kids that, but they're the kids right now scoring 1 and 2s. And you're going to move them into a new, and they're not going to, and that we know if you're scoring 3 or 4 on the 10th grade assessment, you're scoring 21 and above. If you're at level 4, you're at 28 and above. We know that. So,
is there a conflict if we say in Kansas you're proficient at a 19 or a 20, but then they aren't prepared? They can't take credit-bearing classes at a college because they're expecting a 22.
Could be. That's why Kansas will determine that. Right now, again, we don't do this. We just keep it optional. Our ESSA says by 2030, 75% of students in Kansas will be proficient at levels 3 and 4 on the state exam. When you look at the 10th grade state exam, kids that score in levels 3 and 4 are scoring 21 to 36 on the ACT. I just want to point that out. So if we went to this direction, our score is going to come down. Yes, because the kids scoring levels 1 and 2 that are already doing that now and not at proficient are going to be under that. So that would be a determination. If you said, I don't want to do that or I do want to do that, I'd love to have that argument with the curriculum people and the teacher leaders, instructional coaches of Kansas, principals and everyone else.
And I would encourage you, if you haven't already, go look at your high school. What percent of your high school kids that are currently taking the ACT, what percent of them are hitting the college ready mark? And I'll bet you it's higher than the percent of your kids performing at level 3 and 4 for 2 reasons. One, in English language arts, our teachers set our cut score at 3 higher when it's equated to the ACT. It's higher than ACTs. The other thing is you've got 99% of your kids taking the state assessment, and you may only have 75% of the kids taking the ACT. So if we did go that, expect that to balance out percentage-wise of kids hitting college readiness with what you're currently getting on the state assessment, because now 99, does that make sense?
We're not trying to convince you one way or the other. We want to make sure that we have clarified your question so that you can make a decision. Really, the reason that we're asking is we have a window of time that we could do it if you want to do it. And if you don't want to do it, then we will continue to do the 10th grade assessment as is now and gets developed over time. Okay? So, yes.
Just
Last
okay.
one.
Just real quick. So you're still saying that grades 3 through 8 would be
no change.
KU, everything's good.
Yep. No, well, we don't know.
Yeah,
we got to go to
RFP.
But no
yeah,
change.
Yep. Okay.
No change.
We need to know, should Beth write an RFP for 3 through 8 or 3 through 8 and high school?
Yep. No change at 3.
3 through 8, we still got to do.
All right. If you will go to menti.com, MENTI, here's the code, 761633. You have 3 choices. Yes, we want to do ACT and ACT work keys. No. Who thought of this stupid idea? Or 3, I really don't care, or I'm so confused, I just need to go home and go to bed. All right, so you got 3 choices. This is an advisory. This isn't like we have to combine this with the special ed input, combine it with the superintendent, and then guess what? Just like locally, boards do strange things like we recommend smarter balance. We're not going to do that. But they want your input. We want your input. And as you know, 99% of the time, we do that. Menti.com, 761633. And if you're like me trying to get on earlier, the Ramada server being run by squirrels somewhere in a cage, probably crashing as we speak. Brad only allotted me 10 minutes for this conversation. Alan, that's the story of my life right there. Want to see how we're doing? Oh, sorry. 76, 16, 33. That's mine like a steel trap. 76, 16, 33, menti.com. I will tell you how the superintendents and the special ed people voted after you vote. I don't want to influence you one way or the other. Didn't want to influence them either. We'll see if they are as smart as you. $78, 78, 80, 81, 82.
Boy, you add those up pretty fast.
Don't you? You know, Jay and Tammy, like, Randy found Menti a couple years ago, and he's on steroids with it. I just love it. It's anonymous. It's quick. It saves it. You can throw it into spreadsheets. So good.
Has everybody had an opportunity to vote?
Chris is trying to vote twice, kicked him out.
Beth, I assume that you're up next if you want to on the agenda. Because it's ACT, work keys, and state assessments, unless you're going to make Lee do it all.
Okay, we're
whoever's
at 89.
up next can work their way up here.
We're at 89. We're gonna have a few more. Special ed directors, 75% yes, 25% no. Superintendents probably looks ratio-wise just about like this. If you just take the yes, you don't get a majority, right? Because you've got how many are uncertain. But it's still more than the no's by about the same ratio. Close. So I'm going to share this. And by the way, the reason we've done this is because, like all of you locally, you can get loud voices, which I've been fielding for the last month, saying, you better do this, or we're moving to Idaho. Or, this is stupid, don't do this. I'm going to give you a 5-page reason that you shouldn't do it. We don't want the loudest voice to be heard. We want the collective voices to be heard. We'll share those. But as you know locally, sometimes the loudest voice makes you do things when that's not what the majority wants to do or not. So we appreciate this input. 92 people. We had over 100 superintendents at the Council of Soup. I think, Bert, we talked to every special ed director. So we've gotten a really good cross-section. You can see it's not unanimous one way or the other. We have some, and if you add these two together, you're right at what is yes, right? So we're taking all those things into account. I want to mull this over even before I have a conversation with the board, talk it over with Brad. In fact, we had a conversation this morning. We just appreciate you wrestling with it. I hope that you know it wasn't some arbitrary reason we're trying to force you in a fast decision or not. It's just the window that the window was. So.
And the most surprising thing about this whole conversation this morning to me is Cindy never said anything through the whole thing. She must have been the one that sent you the 5-page.
We appreciate that, Monty. Thanks
Either
for
that,
sitting next to her today.
or Monty packed the vehicle and moved to Idaho. One of the two.
A few things my kids reminded me today. Dad, don't leave the house without your list. So I have my list. Nothing on here about assessments either. First thing, just a couple of announcements. We are in need of a science consultant. So we're also we don't want to take anyone out of the classroom or out of a district. So this is just a shameless solicitation. If you know of anyone who would be interested in working for us in the area of science curriculum, please let me know. We understand it's a bad time of year. We understand people are under contract, all that stuff. So just throwing that out there. Also, if you are asking the agency about professional development or anything like that, I just wanted to let everyone, especially this group, know that we've been out. Zet Burks has gone on to University of Arkansas, so for a few months now.
And I'll add to that, we are very conscious that we don't want to take, because we want the best applicants. Right. And you don't want to lose your best teachers or your best people. But we don't want to take someone from a school district during the school year. We're very conscious. But at the same time, we are very flexible and willing to work with someone to where if someone applied and they were our best candidate, we would work with that school district that they could continue their we'll work with you while they are also getting plugged in. So, but we do, the timing when people leave in the summer is the worst time, because the best people that we want are conscientious that they're not going to do that to their district. So they don't even apply, because they're really nice people that care about their kids, and they don't want to. So we will work with the school district if we had a really good candidate.
On the curriculum coordinators listserv, you may have seen it this morning, we sent out some information on student-led conferences. We are interested in whether or not you would be interested for the next curriculum coordinators meeting during the networking session on perhaps some focused conversation on student-led conferences. Some really good stuff that was sent out, some really good links that were sent out this morning. We have the commissioner talking about IPS. I definitely encourage you to watch the video with Linda Darling-Hammond talking about student agency. It's a fairly large topic, but I think that's especially well done. But let us know, and we can provide some focused conversation. Stacy and a number of people can do that for the next networking session. So I'd also like to introduce lunchtime chats. Beth is here. Obviously, we've mentioned Beth. Melissa, Cindy, if you have questions about dyslexia, what's going on the dyslexia front, obviously assessments. Don, I see. Grab these people. We've had a conversation back at the agency. They're going to be available here during lunch, so track them down and keep them from eating their lunch with a lot of questions. New people. I'd like to introduce Haley Steinlange. She comes to us. She's a new researcher on the KSDE team, or the CSAS team. She comes from KU. I asked her interesting things about her life. She mentioned hang gliding and sculpture and all kinds of interesting things. So I don't know. That may or may not be true. Yeah, please stand up. So anytime you submit a data request or you have a question, you might come into contact in the future with Haley. We're very happy to have her. Also in the very back of the room, he's looking at his computer, so I'll say Mike pounds in advance. So he's aware from the Navy to Winfield to KSDE. We're very happy to have him. He will be working anything to do with graduation. Yeah, go ahead and stand up, Mike. Graduation, virtual school. Gosh, we've got him spinning in place. Redesign. So this is his, I think, is this your first curriculum coordinators meeting? Okay. So, well, welcome aboard. And let's see, I'm working down my list. Dr. David Fernkoff, who's going to finish off with the introductions. Very happy to have him. He is our new assistant director over standards. Very happy to have him. And I'm just going to turn it over to you, who's going to do one more introduction, and then you've got a few slides, right? So I'll just give you.
Hello, everyone. Just real quick, standards. First off, if you're needing help with the standards, we are available at KSDE. Shoot us an email, give us a phone call. We are more than happy to help. We are in the beginning phase of planning our activities this summer. We're looking at something. We used to do the summer academies. We have the Impact Institutes. We're working on what we're going to be doing this summer. So keep watching your email. We'll get more details out sooner than later. We recognize you need some time to plan ahead. But the best part of me being up here is I get to introduce our new ELA person. We have Miss Joanne McRail. Thank you, Joanne McRail. And she has a few slides and some information she's going to share with you.
I get confused all the time with the McRail as far as your teacher evaluations and testing. That's not me, otherwise I wouldn't be here. I have two L's. It's right here. It's trying to help me out. There are 4 critical things that I want to talk to you today about that you can take back to your ELA teachers and PLCs to kind of impact instruction and curriculum. Yay. I had one in my bag and I didn't know. I just did something wrong. There we go. Okay. The first one is handwriting standards. Next Friday, October 11th, on the ELA website of KSDE webpage on KSDE website, we are going to put our handwriting standards draft online to receive field comments, K through 6 teachers. We did have a little philosophical change that started to impact the connection between handwriting and literacy. That will see a shift that our committee took, which is a great shift to help out our literacy people K through 2. The other things that you will see are pretty similar to what's happened before. So we will go ahead and take those field comments for about 2 weeks, and then we will meet back together in order to clarify what you're seeing are problems and possibly revise those before we take them to the board in December. If the board approves those, then we will do training on the new handwriting standards in the spring at the service centers is what I'm predicting. The shift, what we saw more was about the need for production of letters without tracing. What the research says is that in order to confirm, and this goes and supports Cindy's dyslexia research as well, that the research states in order for those kids to put it in the letterbox and do orthographic mapping, they have to produce those independently. So we have to shift away from tracing into copying and production. And there's a pacing consideration that we adjusted on that as well to do that. Any other questions on handwriting? Okay, the other thing that we have worked on this summer is updating the assessment development guides. Please, please, please get these back to your teachers and ELA and PLCs. If you go to kansasassessments.org on that page, administrators, educators, and administrators, and then also resources and training, go down to the ELA resources, and you're going to see 3 through 10 on there. What you're going to find are 3 important pieces of information. One, how the test is divided up. I don't think people understand how the test is divided up as far as percentages and depth of knowledge. The second thing that happens is the performance level descriptors. We really went in and clarified these, and we made them vertically aligned. So if you look at these, it gives you a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. And you'll start to see that sometimes it's a concept that's added. Sometimes it's critical thinking that is increasing as you go through the levels. This will be useful in PLCs to help you with your curriculum alignment and what may be missing within those curriculum guides. The last thing, and probably one of the things where most people are kind of focusing a little bit right now, is on formative assessments. On this assessment development guide, it also gives you evidence statements in which you can start to focus in exactly what they have to do on the assessment to manipulate. So you can start to use common formative assessments with those particular things at the correct DOK, and also as far as the 2 to a 3, which is a lot of the phone calls that I'm fielding is, we're stuck on 2, we can't jump to a 3. This is going to give you some information to help your teachers out to do that. The other thing that we saw with the assessment development is that we have some information that needs to be clarified on those. So we're going to look at this. The ELA standards were done in 2017. We're going to go back in and review to clarify about points of confusion in the field, because there are, and want to convene a committee to discuss and provide clarity and possible revision of some of those standards so that they align better and that people understand exactly what it is, what entails that concept. The PLDs, I couldn't change some things. And there's possibilities within there that happen. One of them is the standardization of academic or Tier 3 vocabulary. There are 5 different things, 5 different ways within the standards, K through 12 right now, to tell what a main idea is. We need to standardize that language for our kids. That's one area in reading. The other is the writing progressions, especially writing standards 10 and 11, which are your conventions and your grammar standards. Right now, they do not consider writing progressions, and they're not equitable in grade levels as far as what new skills have to be taught. For example, in one grade, there's 4 new skills that have to be taught. In the next grade, there's 12. Then you look at the distributed practices within those. They can range from 4 to 36. So we want to look at those. Yeah, seriously, there's like 50 that some teachers have to teach and revise. So we need to look at those and address the writing progressions and what's actually age appropriate in order to do those distributed practices as far as the knowledge base is concerned, where it's the use and confuse in order to boost our kids up and actually see the progression. You'll be seeing this come out on my November listserv as far as signing up of people from various districts in order to convene this committee that I hope goes before you start doing assessments. Last thing. I feel like I'm spitting words up here, so I'm sorry. I am getting ready to go out on my first KSDE roadshow, and it is struggling readers and complex text. I've had multiple calls of who is this good for? It's good for any 4th through 10th grade teacher that teaches science, social studies, or ELA. The reason being is that what they're going to learn is current research that affects learner access to complex text and disciplinary literacy. What that looks differently within their discipline, and then also what complex text, how that impacts your reader and their understanding. Why? Increased proficiency and perseverance. That's the 2 things that I keep hearing back from you guys already. About struggling reader success, what do we do to support them for higher levels of DOK questioning and critical thinking? And how we're going to do that is we are going to have teachers experience these strategies, methods, as kids doing it, stopping, analyzing what is the positive benefits of these evidence-based strategies, and then how we need to scaffold our instruction long-term in order to make sure that we get those kids proficient It's a little bit, and I hate to say this word in front of a group of you, but it's how we accelerate kids instead of remediating kids for complex text and disciplinary literacy. My first one is in Lawrence next Thursday. I will be going to all 7 of the service centers in the next month and a half. Information up here. If you're not on my listserv, please get on my listserv so that you get this information. And also invite your teachers. If you email me at the above address, I will get you on the same day. Oh, yes. Oh, I'm going to Beth now. Here's the real lady that knows stuff. Beth Holtz. Or Dawn? Man that knows. You were looking.
I'll go really fast. You want to hand me the clicker, Joanne? Seems like I've seen you guys a lot lately. Oops, that's not my slides. Anybody know where they are? I found them. There they go. All right. So how many of you guys have I seen in the last 3 weeks at least once? Because I know I've seen some of you more than that. Raise your hand. Because I just got done with my road show on the 2-year pilot that we have on the new social studies assessment. By the way, how many of you took the ACT when social studies was part of it? Oh man, see, there are not very many of us left. I'm telling you, we're pretty old. But regardless of that, the ACT no longer has a social studies part, so we're going to have a social studies assessment no matter what we do with the ACT, okay? So back in 2017, Beth and I went in to the commissioner, and the commissioner told us essentially we need to do something with the social studies assessment. And we had kind of this conversation. Number one, the current assessment doesn't do anybody any good. It doesn't help us do anything. It doesn't help the state. Schools can't use it. And it doesn't help teachers, and it sure doesn't help kids. And if you're using it for any of those things, you're misusing the assessment, right? Because it's just not, meant to do that. Current assessment does not improve instruction or learning. As a matter of fact, it may do the opposite, right? You may stop doing any teaching a week before the window, drill and kill your kids on dates and dead people, and then set them down in front of a computer for 2 hours and they take a test, right? So I hope you're not doing that, but that's what happens a lot. Current assessment is costly, very costly, but we're required to assess by state statute, okay? We're required to assess by state statute. So we have developed what are called classroom-based state assessments. And so we're going to be piloting those over the next 2 years. So we already have schools that have attended trainings and have applied, and we're working on the process to do these classroom-based state assessments. We're going to have an assessment that you can use formatively and interimly and summatively in a whole process. So what we're actually doing is a process of instruction, right? Whole process of instruction. Teachers we're no longer going to tell kids or teachers not to look over a kid's shoulder when they're testing, right? You guys, none of you guys had done that before, of course, but now we're going to encourage the teacher to get involved in the process. We're going to encourage the teacher to get involved with their kids and teaching them up to the standards that we want them to have. And so this process is what we want them to do. We want to coach kids up to improve their assessment learning. So a classroom-based state assessment is a demonstration of a student's ability to apply academic, cognitive, and technical skills to build their own understanding and meaning around a particular topic. So what we're trying to do is measure a kid's ability to apply the academic, cognitive, and technical skills that they possess and build knowledge around a particular topic. whatever that topic is, in whatever class that is in social studies, okay? So this year, our pilot is just 6, 8, and 11, but in the future, we envision this being at any grade level and in any social studies topic, right? In any social studies class, as long as there's a certified social studies teacher there. They're way more realistic. Dr. Watson, I don't know if Randy's still here, but one of the stories he tells, I've heard him tell, is school is the only place where you give a kid a problem and tell him he can't look in a book, he can't get on the computer, and he can't ask anybody how to get the answer, right? It's the only place in the world where this happens, is in school. So the new social studies assessment is going to allow kids to collaborate, to actually get coaching, to actually look for information, to actually construct their own knowledge around this particular stuff. It's about doing the stuff, and it's going to be iterative. So if the kid doesn't like his score at the end, he can work on it some more. He can get better. He can do more to get the score that he needs. So it's not a one-time shot, done, complete. It encourages the growth mindset that we all want in our kids, right? I can do this better. I can do this better. I can do this better. And the teachers can be allowed to coach them up. So I know that I've done 3 hours on this in the last few weeks. And that was 5 minutes maybe, right? So I'm here, and I'm going to be here through lunch. So if you need to ask me any questions or interested about trainings, we have some more trainings coming up. I'd be happy to answer those, and I'm going to turn this over to Beth. Do you have slides? Okay.
I'll just say we're really excited about this new model for testing. It has great potential. It's kind of combined at the same time. We're looking at some improvements at the agency with our kids collection and the platform and everything that sets on, so we'll be able to capture the data. You might know, and I know a lot of you will be really happy, but we are aware that we're supposed to be taking writing samples from students, and this is the first test of how it's going to work with the classroom-based instruction. It has, I think our vision is then to move into writing with this in the future so that we can bring writing back into the assessment world, because we know that it's extremely important and valuable, but we also believe it should be classroom-based and kids should be able to grow and improve. So we want it to be a very useful part of the assessment. So we're really excited. So talk to Don, participate, get all the information you need, because it's kind of our vision of the future where we might go with assessments. So in the assessment world, if you have DLM students and they aren't testing, you're late. You're behind. The windows have been open. You need to get in there. You need to get their EEs picked. You need to start testing them, because you know that's a through course assessment and they have to be tested throughout the semester, and then you do it again second semester. The interim testlets have been open since the middle of September. We are aware that our timing was a little bit off. Some of us, showing our age, forgot school started so early, so we've taken note of the complaints, and we'll work on having those available earlier next year so that they'll be more useful at the beginning of school. The interim predictives, that window opens October 7th. So if you're going to use the interim predictives for ELA and math, then that window is October 7th to October 18th, so just be aware of that. The KELPA is a new test this year. We're really excited about it. That window goes from February 3rd to March 13th. So all the scoring materials will be available when you come back after Christmas break. What you need to know about the KELPA when you administer it is that it won't come back to you with the other score reports, right? This is the new test, and it will have to have cut scores set. So we'll be going through the standard setting process. We're trying to firm up the dates on that right now as early as possible. So we'll set the cut scores. We're looking at sometime in May, hopefully, realizing that that'll bring teachers out of your buildings at the end of school, and we know that's not overly popular either. So we're in this window of opportunity, as the commissioner likes to say. We have to set cut scores. Once the group meets and has a recommendation, it takes 2 months before the state board It goes as an information item and then as an action item. And we also realize that you need to know who the kids that scored proficient on the COPA would be when school starts, preferably, but obviously no later than the 9:20 count, right? So we're trying to work all the timing out on this, and we'll do as best we can to meet all the expectations. And then finally, the general summative assessments, that window opens mid-March. So we've had the ACT conversation. Pre-ACT, if you have any questions about ordering your materials or getting signed up for pre-ACT, see Lee Jones. He will be here through lunch to answer and help you with any of that. That's in the fall. And again, I just will say that ACT has let us know on the pre-ACT, the scores might be a couple weeks later than what you would normally expect, because this is, they've cycled back, and this is, in their mind, new enough at this ninth grade level that they're going to have to do a little bit of psychometric work before they get the scores back. But they're also aware of the need to have it back fairly quickly. So we'll put out the information whenever it becomes available. ACT in the winter, because the decision was try to get it administered before the assessment window opened, so you wouldn't have all the problems with logistics and computers and everything else. So that's where we are on the assessment front. Scott, anything else? I don't know where he disappeared to. From CSAS? Okay, we're ready to hand it over.
Well, good morning, everyone. I'm Doug Boleen. I'm an assistant director on the Special Education and Title Services team. I think this is probably the first time I have ever spoke in front of this group. I see some familiar faces, but and I've probably talked to a lot of you on the phone if it concerns title. Tateman and myself are the ones who take care of most of the title questions that come into our office. So one of the suggestions for this meeting was that somebody wanted to talk about school-wides and Kansas Star. And we love to talk about school-wides and Kansas Star, so here I am. And I went the wrong way, maybe. There we go. Okay, so the Elementary and Secondary Education Act lists these 10 components of what it takes to be a school-wide school. Now, does everybody in here know what we're talking about when we talk about school-wides or targeted assisted? Or am I speaking to an audience? Thank you, Tate. I'm glad you know. Okay. So basically, take a look at this list of qualifications or requirements for a school-wide, and keep those in mind as I go through these slides, because I want you to think back to what are these requirements and what are the things that I am going to start presenting to you now. Okay, so we're looking at a needs assessment, reform strategies, highly qualified staff, keeping those staff, educating those staff, giving them PD that helps them hone their craft, parental involvement, assisting preschool students in their transition from pre-K to K. Ringing any bells? Include teachers in your decision making. Ensure that all students are getting the education they deserve. And that's in our title programs, that's what we're looking for. Every kid deserves a quality education. And what are we going to do to make sure they get it? And then the last piece is the coordination and integration of federal, state, and local programs. Okay? Keep that in mind. Okay, so why do you want to become a school-wide? It allows for improvement of the whole system, but the big piece of it down here is it allows you to use those federal dollars to support what's happening in your school across the whole school. If you are targeted assisted, you have a set of criteria that you are going to identify specific students for help if you're targeted. If you're school-wide, now every student becomes a title student, and you can use that money to support everything that's happening in your building. So let's talk a little bit about school improvement, because that's really what we're looking at for school-wide. How do we improve our educational system? Okay? School improvement is continuous. It is not static. You need to keep changing. You also need to be able to honestly evaluate what you are doing and look at your warts. Okay? Where are we now? Where do we want to be? How do we get there? And how do we know we're there? How do we measure that impact? So what does school improvement look like in Kansas? Right? We've got all these different things, or at least people think they're different things, but they all should be working together. We've got an accreditation system that is a school improvement process. Right, Jeanette? We've got redesign, which is school improvement. Right, Jay? We've got Title I school-wide, school improvement. We have our Kansas Learning Network that goes out and works with our identified schools. Used to be called Priority and Focus. Now it's CSI, TSI, ATS. KLN is a school improvement process. And then, of course, you've got your own district plans, your visions of how you want to get better. Okay? And there's probably others, but these are the ones we work with in our agency. So, are any of you familiar with this form? How many do the LCP? Okay, step 3 in the title portion of the LCP has a little line there that says, make sure you've turned in your continuous school-wide program plan. And so I happened across a box of these forms, and as I go looking through them, it's got this list of questions, and it says, have you made any changes to your school-wide plan? And if you had, it goes back to those 10 components. Where did you make a change? If I look at that paper box of forms and start going through them, the majority of them say, nope, didn't change anything. Nope, didn't change anything. Nope, didn't change. No, 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 no. Here's the problem. A lot of those plans were written in 2002. So if you have not made a change in your school-wide plan since 2002, I'm guessing you're being left behind. You're not really taking school improvement seriously. There are some that were written as recently as 2007, so they're only 12 years old. And the other problem with this is that we had a change in the law in December of 2016. So most of the plans that we have that were written under NCLB. Now we have a new law, ESSA, and we need new plans. Since 2016, anybody who wanted to become a new school-wide had to submit their plan through the Kansas STAR system. This year will be the last year, 1920, that we will accept those old school-wide plans written under NCLB. So this year is a transition year. By next year, all school-wide plans need to be in Kansas Star. And we'll talk about that in just a second. As you are looking at putting these school-wide plans into Kansas Star, you need to be considering what your accreditation plan look like. If you're in redesign, what does that look like? If you are working with KLN, what does that look like? The requirements for school-wide and those districts working with KLN are the same. So we'll talk about those. Okay, how many are familiar with Kansas Star? A few of you. Okay, Kansas Star is an online platform that can be used to drive and document your school improvement work. Those of you that have gone through, were in the first cohorts of accreditation, I think the word got out to you all that you can use your work in Kansas Star to show what you are doing in your district towards accreditation purposes. The system is free to any district, any building in the state. All you have to do is contact us to get a username and a password. This is just the website. If you are not familiar with it, it's industar.org. If you just want to go in and play, there's a dummy site, and you just use KS School as your username and password, and you can go in and mess around in it, and you won't hurt anything, but just to see what the system looks like if you're not familiar with it. Hopefully, people in your district that work with LCP have gotten notices about the meetings that we're having in Hutchinson. There's 3 of them, and we will start looking at maneuvering within the system at those meetings. So if you haven't had any training in Kansas Star, you can get it there. So the requirements to move your plan over into Kansas Star. The old plans, from what I've told, the ones that were written in 2002 were probably about 80 pages long. I've been told it was streamlined down to 40 pages. And so this is what it is now. Remember those 10 components that we talked about at the beginning. In order to meet those 10 components, we have what we call a supplemental form because it's a list of questions that we just don't think Kansas Star addresses very well. The first one is your needs assessment. We, on the title team, do not expect you to do a separate needs assessment for title programs. It should be the same needs assessment that you used for accreditation. If you're in redesign, it's your why. Why are you making changes? Because you've seen something in your buildings you don't like and you want to make it better. Okay? So it's not anything new. All we're asking you to do is summarize what is the needs assessment that you've used. You're not going out and doing something separate for us. All of these things should tie together. The transitions piece, we don't have any good indicators of how you are preparing your pre-K kids for kindergarten. You can certainly bring in your ASQ stuff. Things you're providing for parents, transitioning pre-K to K. And then the last one is, if you become a school-wide, how are you going to coordinate all these different things, these different funds, your Title I, your state money, your local money? How does it all fit together to provide a comprehensive education program? So there's 3 questions off those 10 requirements that we need you to answer separately. Then the rest of it is actually getting into Kansas Star and working out a plan. And so when you first go in, this is pretty small, and I apologize for that, but we've got 5 different categories that we look at. And when you first go in, you need to choose an indicator or something to work on within each of those different categories to fulfill those initial requirements of a school-wide plan. So we've got leadership and decision-making, curriculum assessment and instructional planning, classroom instruction, parent-school community, and tiered support. Now, these indicators, and there's a whole bunch of them. When we first started out 7 years ago, I think we had 110, 15, 20, whatever it was. And this was for focus and priority districts, and they said it was way too many indicators. There's too many things for us to do. So we cut it back, and we cut it back to make it manageable. Now that we are expanding back the other direction and saying use this for KESA, for redesign, districts are coming to us and say we need more indicators, we need more choices. So we are continually working on this. The indicators that are in there now, we have crosswalked so that they match up with KESA, with the R's, with redesign, with the principles, so that when you go in there and choose, as you are looking at moving your school-wide plan into Kansas Star, you need to be aware of what are the things we've focused on in KESA, and make sure you align your school-wide plan to your accreditation plan. If you're in redesign, that too. Okay? All of the indicators are crosswalked. So I've got the rubrics up here, and I hope it's up to date. I got it off the website. So, but we've got relationships, relevance, responsive culture, and rigor. The indicators have been delineated to meet those different R's. Now, I will tell you that we did the crosswalk. We made where we think they go best. It is not set in stone. If you are looking at it and you've got an indicator that you think, well, we've got it in relationships, but it also works in responsive culture, we're not going to argue with you about that because we know there are different ways it can go. As we look at redesign, okay? Personalized learning, student success skills, community partnerships, real-world applications, okay? Go back to those 5 areas that we said were responsible or that you needed to choose from to start with for your school-wide, okay? Community partnerships, parent involvement. KESA has community relationships, student success skills, curriculum, instruction, personalized learning. Tiered instruction could go under that. I mean, there's all kinds of different ways, but you can hit all of these different things and you've got it all in one place. And that's our goal with Kansas Star. Your school-wide plan should align with everything else you're doing. It should not be something different. And if you use Kansas Star the way it is intended to be used, it can help keep pushing you forward. We talk about building leadership, district leadership teams. Okay? There's places in here where you can keep track of those meetings, those minutes. What are the things that are happening in your district that you can go back to and say, you know, you were responsible for doing this. Where are we at? What do we need to do to keep moving forward? If you are not in Kansas Star already and you're school-wide and need to be making this move, you can contact Pat Hill in our office. Her email is there, phill@ksde.org, and she can get you set up with username and password. Now, you can do this from a district level. We have district indicators for KESA, and then school-wide plans are written at a building level. Redesign is at building level. So you can have a district password, and then you can also have building passwords, or you will have. You also have guest passwords so that you can make this plan available to members of your community. So if you're looking at how do I involve parents more in my community better, you can make that available to them. They can log in and see. They can't see everything. There's a filter there, but they can see what the plan looks like, what are the things that you are working on. won't necessarily go into your meetings and the notes that were taken and those kind of things that are a little bit more private, but it will show your plan. Question? Yes. For this year, yes. The plan then, one of the things we're going to have to look at is you can submit the plan every year, and so it may do away with the need for that continuing school-wide plan because everybody's going to be in here, hit the button in May when school's out, and you're done for the next year. Remember that part of being a title building is that you are doing a yearly evaluation of your program. Okay? In redesign, you are always iterating. You're trying things. If it doesn't work, you go back to the drawing board, you figure out what you need to improve, and you try it again. Okay? School-wide should be doing the same thing. You're looking at your program all the time. Where can we improve? I don't know anybody that's perfect. I know I never was when I was in the building. Vicki can speak to that. Everybody can improve. And like I said, when we look at these continuing school-wide forms that are turned in from 2002 and people say that they haven't changed anything in the last 17 years, that makes me worry a little bit. Anything else? Okay, turn it over to Tate.
Thank you, Doug. And there's Doug's contact information. If you have other questions or want to give him trouble, you can do that. A couple follow-up things from that is Doug mentioned the upcoming LCP meetings. Our team is going to do a lot better job this year and going forward. We're going to be doing quarterly meetings, one day special ed, one day title and LCP. And Doug mentioned those coming up in Hutch. The special ed one is October 22nd, and the 23rd is the LCP one. And part of what that will be Doug going into more depth for these buildings that need to go school-wide, plus a lot of other materials. The tentative agendas for both meetings have gone out. Another thing with school-wide, and I'm taking my lead from Scott Smith, either today or early next week, there'll be a job posting that will be our school-wide consultant and a consultant that will work with our CSI, TSI, and ATS schools. So again, like Brad was talking earlier and Scott was talking earlier, if you have people this would be a good fit for, we'll work with you during the school year if they're interested. But if you know people, send them our way because we're looking for more staff, so those jobs will come out. So I'm here to talk about evidence-based practices because in ESSA, this came out, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but more importantly, when we get to the state at risk piece. But the key for ESSA is all of our title funds have to be spent on evidence-based practices. And what we're talking about is if it's PD, it needs to be PD that's evidence-based, it's ongoing. But the question we get is we spend most of our funds, especially in Title I, some districts in Title II and Title IV and Title III, on staff. So how is that evidence-based? Well, the key when we're talking about staff is the practices our staff are using have to be evidence-based. And we talk about that because we don't see a lot of problems with federal funds and that happening. We've been really good at doing that. However, 2 years ago, our state legislature adopted very similar language to go with our state at risk funds. So our K-12 state at risk funds, which are generated by our free lunch counts, and then we serve kids that fall in categories that show them as at risk. Well, a lot of times we see stuff and we don't do a whole lot. Well, our legislature was very serious about this change this time around. And 20 of our districts and our agency got to enjoy their seriousness this past summer. If you're one of those 20 districts, you know post-legislative audit was involved in finding out what's going on with our funds that go with state at risk. So as a state, we have to be able to do a good job of showing that we're using our state at risk funds on evidence-based practices. And that was the terminology for 2018, 2019. So we developed this website with this nice long URL. The easiest way to get to it's just through the subject index under E and going to evidence-based. So we required all districts at the end of the school year last year in their LCP annual report to list some of the practices. Half to 2/3 of our districts did a pretty good job. We had to do a lot of tutoring and work with some of our other districts, but especially our 20 districts under post-legislative audit, really we worked with very closely because we wanted them to be successful, because we want to show that as a state, we're using our funds to get the best bang for the buck with the evidence-based practices. So post-legislative audit is finished up with that, and we'll be getting a report sometime in the next couple months about what they found out by working with KSDE and these 20 districts. Well, last legislative session, there was a slight change made in the law. And instead of just best practices, it says on or after July 1st, 2009, such best practices should include, but not be limited to, programs and services provided by state-based national nonprofit organizations. Well, the first thing we said is, what does that mean? So the key is, it's still what was in the previous law, but it can also be some programs. If you look at this, it's like JAG and Abbott. Those are the type of programs they're talking about. But the key is any program will be good for the use of at-risk funds if it can be tied back to best practices. So since I knew Doug was talking about IndaStar and I was going to be talking about evidence-based, I pulled some of our evidence-based practices that are on IndaStar just to kind of give you an idea. These are pretty basic ones that hopefully are going on in all of our districts. I'm just going to pull some from curriculum. Instructional teams develop standards-aligned units of instruction for each subject and grade level. Units of instruction include standards-based objectives and criteria for mastery. Those are all evidence-based practices. All teachers reteach based on post-test results. So those are the things we really want you guys to be thinking about and work with our staff in our districts that are working with the LCP. Because some of you do that and you understand some of this evidence-based practices. But in a lot of our districts, we have different people. Sometimes it's a bookkeeper, sometimes it's the treasurer that are filling out these reports. They don't understand how important these type of things are. That we're doing these evidence-based practices in our classroom, but in the past we weren't called out to identify them this way, and now we're being called out by our state legislature that we need to be identifying this. So when we do annual reports at the end of the year, we eventually can give them over to the state legislature. And that's one thing Doug and I this year really put into a lot of our emails when we're asking people. The reminder, this is our accountability piece to our state legislature and our taxpayers of how we're spending these dollars. So if we're going to continue to fight for more dollars, we need to be able to show how we're using these dollars and that we're using them well. So right now, there are 8 questions that districts have to answer on state at risk. And if we can do a good job with that, it's not going to have to expand anymore. But if the state legislature has to keep coming back asking for more and more reasons and evidence that we're doing a good job, we will have to expand. So we're just trying to remind people that this is very important. And we know a lot of people that work with the LCP, the annual report was just kind of an extra thing that we kind of did at the end of the year, and we didn't put a lot of effort into the state at risk page. Well, now we've got to make sure that we're doing our best to show how successful we are with these state at risk funds at this point. Okay, so Any questions about this? I know I went over pretty quick. Like, that's our website. We've got a lot of these things. We've had a lot of people, some in this room, that have found that some of the practices or programs they want to use aren't on this website. That's when you can send it to us and we can get them added, because eventually we're going to expect to see auditors coming out to districts, and if you've put that you're using these at-risk practices, you're going to have to prove that they're evidence-based, so you can have the evidence, the research at the district level, or show them on the website where they are. We have What Works Clearinghouse, IRIS, Florida Reading Research, and many others. Yes. What? Yeah. Basically, best evidence. If there's evidence out there that you can show, like if it's not on there, you can send it to us with the research and the evidence, and we'll get it up there. I don't think I'm answering your question. Oh, you're talking about the reading program? This is completely separate from that. Yep. Thank you, Beth. Yeah, you are correct on that one for the most part, but this is separate. Any other questions? And if you have some after you leave or later today, you can grab me, or here's my contact information on this. And then I think I'm the last person in the morning. So do we know if lunch is ready or anything? As I look around and nobody's helping. What? Noon? Okay. So do we want to go? Okay. No. Yep, we can go on with the next part. He had a good question. It was listed on the agenda of the rating program, the evidence-based reading program. We didn't talk about that this morning. No, I don't, because that's not my program. Jennifer, did you have a question before? Oh, Jennifer asked a good question. On the application, the at-risk part is no longer there. That's because a lot of people in the field complain that this doesn't mean anything. There's nothing on this application that means anything. So we went through our department and we agreed with that. However, at the end, the annual report for state at risk will still be on there. So the annual report's still there, but the application's not. Yes. 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 So you could bring a team. Yes. And if you look at the tentative agenda, kind of what we're looking at is that type will be more in the afternoon toward the end of the day for the Kansas Star piece, because some of our districts won't be using that because they're target assisted. So if they could come for all day, or if you just wanted them for part of the day, that's up to you. But the whole day will be worth buildings being there as long as the administrator. And it's really hard for the LCP because every district does it very differently. So, any other questions? They've been going out on different listservs, but the ones in October for special ed is the 22nd, and for LCP is the 23rd. And the LCP will be at Hutchinson Community College because we had to shift the location for that date. Any other questions?
visit just a little bit about the at-risk reading program that you will receive the equivalent of somewhere around $7, $8. Let's share the history first. About 5 years ago, Beth, the legislature put a bunch of money out for one program, and that was Lexia. But they didn't do an RFP, and that upset a bunch of legislators. So then they said, okay, put out an RFP. Then iStation won it. So for the last 2-3 years, you could use iStation for free, and the state paid for it. Well, this last legislative session, they said, why are we telling schools what to use? Why don't we just let them pick whatever evidence-based reading program they want? And if it has evidence-based behind it, and you've got a kid using it, then the state will give you a little bit of money. And they appropriated $1.2 million. Well, guess what? If you divide $1.2 million by every kindergartner through third grader, you get to about $8. So we're estimating. So then what we had to do, poor Cindy and Joan and Scott had to come up with a list. We don't know everything you're using. So we go to Wattsworks Clearinghouse. If there's evidence, it's on there. It'll never be comprehensive, because just because you're using it doesn't mean it's on that list. So, and here's the other thing. It's good for 1 year. Will it still be there next year? Probably not. So on September 20th, on the SO66, which is the superintendent's report, they gave us a number of how many kids that they believed would be receiving services with that program. And then when our auditor comes out, they'll audit, and you'll say, yep, here's how. It's a 1-year gig. Is it the most effective way? It probably would have been better if they'd have just put the money on the base and let you guys use it. But that was last minute in a conference committee, and they just said, let's put 1.2 million in and let them pick. Well, so we're scrambling trying to come up with, how do we know? Well, so we create a list. If you're using something that's evidence-based, it's not on there, call us. But it'll happen 1 year. But that is totally different than what Tate was just talking about. Any questions on that? I mean, how many of you want to admit that you're not doing anything that's evidence-based, that's helping your kids at that level reading? And again, it's not professional development. It's a program that you had to purchase, and we're reimbursing you, just good, strong teaching practices, even though that's evidence-based. It's got to be something tangible that the purpose was we're reimbursing you for an expense that you went and bought something to use for kids like Lexia. So we'll live through this because it probably won't happen, but it was not very well. I'll just say they didn't get any input. So I hope that helps. Food is coming. I just want to share something with you. Yes. Yes. They appropriated $1.2 million for this year. It most likely isn't going to be in any future because it was a 1-year appropriation. And when you get it, for those that, if you also do the budget, sorry about that. You're not bleeding, are you? All right. May have to put some ice on it here in a minute. For those of you that do the budget, it will be a reimbursement, which means you can spend above your general fund by whatever amount that is. And Dale and Craig will help your budget people do that. But it's not going to be a lot. It would have been, so anyway, there was politics in that, believe it or not. Well, they're setting up one thing that I think we might want to think about in the future for some discussions, and that is, what are the effects of the Board of Regents going away from qualified admissions? And they're going to basically look at their GPA and their ACT score. And honestly, as opposed to being dishonest with you up to this point, you know, they're like, why are they telling you what courses you need and messing around with course codes and all of that, when really two of the most key things to the success is what their GPA is and what their ACT score is. So the state board's going to have a conversation with graduation requirements. Do we still say 3 units of math, but depending on where the kid wants to go, those units could be different? But this will really be important for your individual plan of study and working with the student and the parent and the guardians to say, if you want to go to a 4-year, we need to make sure you're academically prepared if you want to go, you know what I mean? And I'll tell you right now, for most school districts in the state, your teachers and your schedule is geared around qualified admissions. Because for just about every one of your kids, it's Algebra 1, Geometry, Algebra 2, whether it started in 8th grade or whatever. Then you have some upper level courses. Well, what if a kid is like, I'm not going to a 4-year, I want to do something else. I would rather have business math and statistics or whatever. And you're already kind of, well, how do I create a section for, you know, so we're going to have some discussions about, with what the Board of Regents just passed, what does that mean to you? And the state board will eventually start having conversations, because the state board does not require Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. They require 3 units of math. You can issue a kid a high school diploma with 3 units of math and then not be Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2. The problem is you set your schedules up because you don't know if that kid will or will not, and if they don't have qualified admissions, then they're, you know, so we'll have to have some discussions around that, simply because we don't know what that may or may not do to your schedules, to all of that. So we know as much as you know. And that's what came out in the minutes from their meeting. What we don't know is, well, what will the effects of that be on your schedules, on your teaching loads, and you know, when you try to personalize learning for every student, and then they all don't need, and so those are some discussions that we're going to need to have. Is there anything else food-wise, or are we ready to turn them loose? All right, as normal, when did the changes take place? Starting with this year's 8th grade. So I don't believe it goes into effect till 2024, because we got to let these kids, but the conversations about what that might mean for your schedules and your staff, we need to start those conversations now. Or soon. Doesn't have to be today, unless you want to. All right, normal procedures. When I start seeing you guys messing with each other and doing things that you shouldn't be doing because you're done eating, then we'll get started again. All right, I think we're going to go ahead and move forward. Continue to eat. If you're not done, So I want to share with you what we're getting ready to roll out with our star recognition program. But I also want to help put it a little bit into context, because we also, this will be new in December, your legislature, and this one is kind of helpful. New in legislation is we are required, starting this year, to have a one-page accountability report for every district and every school. So, as many of you are aware, all of this information you can find on your report card. We just have to condense some things and make it available for parents, community members, you, anybody, to go to a district's, and you'll have to put a link to this on your website. But it's a one page, it'll be front back, and it will tell kind of a summary of how your district is doing. Instead of having to search all over the current report card to find out all this information. Okay? So this will be new. We've been working on this since we found out we had to do it, which was last legislative, about June. So you will have things on this report that will talk about your student demographics. All right? I'm moving to a community. Or I'm selecting districts. I'll learn a little bit about your student demographics. I can also see whether you're accredited, conditionally accredited. I'll know what your annual meaningful differentiation is. I'll remind you of what that looks like here in the next slide. Most people, what does approaching mean? I don't know, so I'll remind you of it. Your superintendent, Jane Doe, you'll just have some of that kind of information. It will have post-secondary academic readiness. And what we mean by that is we try, and I've heard it several times today, and we don't like to use the word proficient. Because proficient means a lot of things. Under NCLB, it meant you're doing grade level work. Under ESSA, it means you're doing work that would prepare you for work at the college. So we just say post-secondary academic readiness. So it's the percent of your kids scoring at level 3 and 4. You'll have your district compared to the state. Nice, colorful graphs. For those of you, we need to remind what does annual meaningful differentiation mean is under ESSA in our new plan, we no longer say where you are relative to some state goal. What we do is we take all 286 school districts, put it on a bell based on your API, Assessment Performance Index, in our assessed areas, and we find the median. We do it by buildings, we do it by districts. We find the median, and it's how are you performing relative to all other schools, not, remember NCLB, there was this road to 100%, and it was relative to some target, regardless of where everybody else in the state was. So about 66% of our school districts will be meeting. We had a standard deviation, Lee might remember, Beth might, of like 1 standard deviations to because research shows that so anyway, That's not on the report card. It's when you see that your district is approaching and you have to explain relative to all other schools. That's where we're at. And you can kind of look at the percents of what percents of our schools and districts are in each area. If you look at, if we're doing buildings, there's 83 buildings that are below, which just means we need to give them some extra supports. And I'll tell you this, we've looked at the data. Every one of those buildings have the highest risk factors in the state. When you talk about chronic absenteeism, poverty, it makes sense. We did not have one building that I could see that was in here that had no business because, you know. So anyway, that's what that word on there, it comes from this. You will also have your post-secondary effective. Again, all of this stuff is on the report card. Bless you. It's all on the report card. We just have to condense it. Now, there was a lot of argument about what goes on this, because the person that carried this bill wanted only state assessments, and they wanted us to rank you and give you a label of A through F. Luckily, we walked them away from that. But you'll see that these mostly are aligned around the board outcomes and what Kenzen said that we value in a more balanced system. There will be assessment results. It'll look something like this. For the data people, it'll tell level 1 through 4, math, ELA, science. It'll give kind of a linear so you can show whether it's growth, you're having growth. There will be all students. There will also be subgroups. I'm just kind of giving you examples of what you would see on this report. There will also be ACT performance. Again, all of that is on your report card. And I agree, it would be nice to go to a school district and not have to click for 3 hours figuring out where everything is. You can just print off one page, front, back. It's going to have all this information. We just wanted you to know, because come around December, we will put it out there, and we just, again, heads up, it's coming out in about December. All right? There will be this kind of information. Expenditures per pupil. Which ones are with instruction? Which one includes operational? Chronic absenteeism rates. So it's just going to be able to, a one-pager, it's going to tell a lot about the makeup of a district. What's also really handy, if you're on a visitation team or an OVT chair, you can look at this and learn a lot more about the district that you're going to visit than what you probably have right now. Unless you spend a lot of time on their report card and you happen to be just a little bit nerdy and you spend all weekend figuring out where everything is, because, you know, sometimes I forget where things are. We are redoing our website too. So, and there will also be star recognition. Again, how do we fit this all onto one front and back? Tricky. It's taken us 4 months to figure it out. And then Randy's like, yeah, I don't like the color. So anyway, now there's just been a lot of thought that went into this, but I do think it would be very handy to be able to print one page. You will use it more than your community will, let's be honest. But the whole thing was out of transparency, so that'll be coming out. Our goal is in December. So let's talk about the star recognition. The whole goal and purpose is to try and recognize, and now the star recognition is district. It's not building. to recognize districts in the areas that Kansan said are important to us. That's the top half of KISA, what we're all going after. All right? And these are the 7 areas that we will be recognizing. 3 of them are quantitative, meaning that we can calculate it. We have the data. 4 of them are qualitative, meaning when we went around the state, people said social emotional growth has got to be a huge focus, but let us measure it locally. So we don't have any way to calculate any kind of a recognition for you. So 4 of them you will actually apply for. Just like if you're wanting to apply for schools of character, your civic advocacy network. All right? So let's walk through these. Prepared for high school graduation has more of the academic components, and we'll start with the state assessment. What percent of your students are at level 3 and 4 as a district? We take math, ELA, science, combine them for your total district. I'm going to tell you right now, nobody in this state gets a gold. Because gold, does anybody in here have over 75% of their students performing at level 3 or 4? No. Will we in the future? I'll bet you we will, but not today. So I'll just be honest with that. But that is our aspiration, and the reason we chose 75%, because and not 100, because the Georgetown data says we need at least 70 to 75% of our kids earning some post-secondary, then let's make sure they're academically ready. So that's where we picked that. And then you can see the ranges there. The precondition, you have to have 95% of your kids participate in the state assessments. That's an ESSA requirement. We will eventually add ACT and work keys to the whole prepared, but we don't have enough kids taking it now we need to get up. Plus, currently we're looking at using your 12th grade cohort. So throughout high school, their highest score when they graduated, what's their, So anyway, but we'll eventually add ACT and work keys. There's a sheet coming around that has these details on it. And by the way, hopefully by next Monday, all these PowerPoints will be posted on my website under Curriculum Leaders. So, okay, graduation rates. Our state goal is 95%. So we have a lot of golds that are going to be recognized. We have a lot of silvers, bronze, copper. For the quantitative ones, we start at the state average and go up. The precondition for this is your post-secondary effective 5-year average has to be at least within the range that we would predict or higher. And here's why. We have some districts that have a 98% graduation rate, but only 25% of their kids are going on and doing anything relative to 2-year, 4-year technical, and we would predict them to be 15% higher. So this isn't about, well, we're just going to graduate every kid so we can get a star. No, so the condition is graduate them with the skills to go on and do something afterwards too. So that's the one precondition to earn one of these. Your district's 5-year effective rate must be within that range or above. And we actually allow you a negative 0.4 variation. We base that off Hattie's work. So we give you some room there. All right? Post-secondary success. Gold, if you're a 5-year average effective rate is 70% or above of your kids 2 years out are still enrolled or have earned something, we have some districts that will be gold. And we go back down, and again, just because you have 49 or 51%, if that's below what we would predict you to be based on your risk factors, you don't get a star. At the same time, we have some commissioners awards with this. We have some districts that are below the state average, but they're exceeding what we would predict. So if you're exceeding what we would predict based on your risk factors, and you are plus 0.4 to 0.9, you're going to receive a commissioner's award for post-secondary success. And I'll tell you right now, one of our largest districts in the state with the highest cumulative poverty, the highest chronic absenteeism, the highest risk factors in every category is going to get recognized in this. Because they may be at 29% effective rate, but it far exceeds what we would predict because of all the risk factors in their district. If you're 1 standard deviation to 1.9, you get a commissioner's award with honors. And then over 2 standard deviations above what we would predict. So does that make sense, or are you just like, that's a bunch of, I don't get what you're saying? Because I give you an example. If we would predict, based on your risk factors, your 5-year effective rate ought to be within here, and your average is 39.3, that's 0.9 standard deviations above what we would predict, so that district would be getting a commissioner's award. Again, our purpose for this is several. One, we want to recognize districts in the areas that Kansan said we value, because we also want to drive what you guys said we valued in our system. The qualitative ones are those 4. We're working on rubrics. That's my example of a rubric. High quality there. I wouldn't even had to put anything up there and you would have said, hey, that's a rubric. But we'll put it out there and you'll be able to just, here's the criteria for kindergarten readiness. Here's, like any teacher evaluation rubric. What does it mean to be below, effective, And you'll go along and you'll click on those thinking, well, I believe in this area we have these things in place. That looks like us. Now, you're going to have evidence to support it. But you'll click on there, and then it'll calculate whether or not you're at the gold level, the silver, the bronze, the copper. But we'll be putting those out. Our goal is by next spring, we will put those out there for you to look at and start saying, hey, we've been doing a ton of work in social-emotional learning and growth, and we'd like to see where we're at. You'll be able to go through that. But it'll also tell you, if I want to move to that level, what would I need to do and what things would I want to start putting in place? So we'll be putting those rubrics out there. And when it's all in place by this time next fall, when we add the qualitative ones to the quantitative, we'll have districts that have recognition in several different areas. I doubt anybody's going to have all of them, but at least we're starting to recognize, and I'll tell you what, nope, because someone will tweet it. Now, you promise you won't tweet it? Jeremy? Okay. There are some in Kansas that do not like this because they want to base it all off state assessments. And even though it's in there and it's valuable and it's the number one thing when we say definition of a successful high school graduate, they're academically and they're cognitively. And they have technical skills. They have employability skills. They know how to be civically engaged. We want to drive the conversation and the recognition about what Kansas said. That's what we want. So we will start rolling out a recognition system. So maybe some of you can replace your standard of excellence banners that are starting to fall off the wall in your gym, and you keep duct taping them back up there, because y'all have them. You know, we were there, and we want to start moving forward what Kansas said they valued. Questions on this? Really? All right. Okay, Jeanette. While you're coming up, you sure? We'll be putting some more stuff out on this, but we're excited about it because there's a lot of districts that are going to be able to be recognized for things in addition to just how you're doing academically. So the commissioners, great question, Beth. I'm glad you came today. I think the commissioner is planning on introducing and rolling this out at the annual conference, which is later this month. He'll share it with the board probably in October and then roll it out at the annual conference. There you go.
Thank you. I always mess up with the clicker. I go back, forth, I do everything that I'm not supposed to do. Okay. Great. Okay. Good afternoon. I know that we're all winding down, so hopefully your attention span is still pretty good. I know mine would not be, so I'm just talking based on experience. My name is Jeanette Nobo, and I'm the Assistant Director with Teacher Licensure and Accreditation, in charge of accreditation for those who do not know me. And I want to just provide an update. I know that much of the information that we have right here, it has been put out through the DLS newsletter, through some of the hot topics, etc. But we really never know who's really listening or who's really reading that. So it doesn't hurt for us to re-emphasize these things, particularly with the curriculum leaders. So I wanted to try to just give you some updates on that. Some general expectations that we have for systems coming this year. We want to make sure that we reiterate that systems need to be contacting their chair and their OVT. Don't wait until the time of your visit to do that. Do it early, okay? As a system, if you don't do it early enough, by the time that you end up contacting them because you want to have a meeting maybe a month later, maybe the schedules don't jive, okay? So you need to make sure that that is happening. Or maybe you find out that your chair moved, they didn't let you know, right? And so now you find out where they're at and you call them and you find out that they can't do it because they either went too far away or they have so many other things with their new position that they can't do that. The same thing goes with your OVT members. So make sure that you contact them, find out if they're still willing to serve, and try to schedule a time for that visit, even if it's a couple of tentative dates, okay? The other thing is make sure you're meeting with your district leadership teams and your building leadership teams. This is not KISA, although it is a system accreditation and it is at the system level, meaning the district level. That does not mean that your buildings are not involved in the process. The district does not exist in a vacuum, and it cannot succeed or improve in any of the board goals area if your buildings are not doing the work, if your teachers are not doing the work. So make sure that they understand, your buildings and your teachers, that they do understand what's going on, that they understand what you're trying to improve, and take a look at those alignments of your building goals with what your district goals are, okay? The idea behind your district goals is that you can provide support to your buildings in some way or another. So if they're wanting, I'll take curriculum alignment. If they're wanting to do curriculum alignment and they don't know where to start, then maybe your district goal was to identify different different strategies for curriculum alignment, and then they end up offering it, and then professional development happens, etc. So there should be this alignment that's going. Also, when you're looking at that as a system, make sure you know, and we've heard that several times, make sure you know whether your system is a redesigned school, whether or not your system has MTSS, whether your system has KLN, anything other program that is school improvement related, so that they could be aligned and integrated. They should not be separate processes. We don't want you to feel that now I have to do this, and now I have to do this, and now I have this that I need to do. Okay, they should all align. Amanda's going to talk to you about ASQ. There's no reason why whatever you need to do with ASQ is not part of your KISA process. It should be, right? We have a board goal in terms of improving kindergarten readiness. So make sure you really take a look at that. It's time to really also take a look at your data. If you have not been looking at your data to find out whether or not it has any impact, if your strategies or interventions, whatever you want to call them, are not showing improvement, or why they're not showing improvement, or why they are showing improvement, right? You need to analyze that so that when your team comes in, you can have that discussion with them. One of the most critical things that a chair can end up doing for us is really providing and really identifying those evidence pieces within their report, okay? So discuss how that process, how your interventions are working, what is the impact, and how they're impacting the state board goals, okay? Any questions on that? Some other expectations. Again, this goes along with when you're visiting with your BLTs or your DLTs. It's not only those 8, 6, 10 people that are in those committees. It's really all staff. Okay, so make sure your principals, as they're visiting, they have their teacher meetings or whatever, that this is part of the discussion. Okay, we don't want to overwhelm them thinking, oh, now I got to do this and now I got to do this. Make sure they understand how these things really fit in. This year, everyone will be completing their system yearly update for the year that they're in the system. And so those started last year, so they should be familiar with everyone. You need to have your OVT visit, and make sure that you follow up with your OVT chair if you're not sure that they have finished that report while they're there. Okay, we did run into an issue last year of a report that was not in the system. There was some misunderstanding. It wasn't anybody's, it's not to put blame or anything, but it's your accreditation system, it's your visit. So you need to make sure that if you know that that OVT chair did not finish the report during their visit, that you then follow up with them, because they have 30 days to submit that report. We have been suggesting to all the OVT chairs when we do the training that they try to finish it at the time of that meeting, and that then when they are discussing with the system about when the date is going to be and what the agenda is going to look like, that they're able to add some time at the end of that agenda for writing that report, okay? I'll tell you, again, based on experience, if I don't finish that report at that time, I leave, I get so busy with work, 30 days pass, and I have still not done it. Maybe I shouldn't be admitting that, but based on my experience, I just know, I know what happens with me. We get involved with so many things. So make sure you are able to verify that they have finished that report. For the OVT chair, goes back similar to the systems. If you're an OBT chair, make sure you know who your team members are. Okay, they could have changed. Okay, if you were an OBT chair and you're not going to chair anymore, let the system know. Okay, it seems like a duh, but it happens. We get involved with other things and we forget what are all the things that we had on our plate, so we need to follow up. Contact the system if they haven't contacted you. This is a co-responsibility piece. So if you don't hear from your system, you're their chair, they selected you because they have confidence in you. And so as part of that responsibility, if they haven't contacted you, if the system hasn't contacted you as a chair, then you should be contacting them and saying, hey, we need to set up a date. Have you thought about it? Okay. You review their system yearly update as a chair. You review their system yearly update prior to making the agenda with them and collaborating. So you might be calling the system twice, one to set the meeting, right? And maybe they haven't finished their system yearly update. And then a second time to really square out that agenda and have some discussions about what that agenda should look like. Once you and your OBT team have looked at that report, you should be getting together by phone, Zoom, whatever you want, okay, to have a discussion about what kind of needs you have in order to write a better report. What kind of concerns, what kind of evidence are you going to be looking for? Are there some schools within that system that you want to visit based on some discussions that were on that report, okay? What are some of the focus groups that you want to meet with? You should be meeting, if you have not yet, you should be meeting by now with some focus groups to find out whether or not those focus groups really understand and whether the process is really a system process. Does the community know? Do the parents know? Are teachers aware? And things like that. So this year would be a good time for those systems that are in year 3, 4, and 5, particularly if you're being accredited this year, to take a look and see what are those focus groups saying? What are you finding out? Okay. Collaborate on the agenda, like I said, and discuss those needs and concerns. Any questions about this slide? Okay. Just some general information on KSDE last year, which was 2018 and 19. Those systems that got accredited will be doing an initial report as well as their system yearly update year 1. If you are a system that got accredited last year, until you open that initial system report, it will not throw you into the next cycle, so you're not going to see. You might go in and just see that it still says 2019. The minute that you open that initial report, it'll throw that to 2024, I believe. Okay? The team makeup. The question is, does it have to be all new? We have not specified any rules around that or expectations, but I'm going to go with what I would call common sense, if you will. You want to be able to ask your team if they're willing to continue. They've been with you maybe 2 years only, so they might want to continue with you. There might be some that just say, I can't do it anymore. We don't have anything at this point in time in our process that says change them. We're saying use common sense, don't overwork your team, okay? So make sure that they're really willing to work with you. I would also say that if you have a team that you have not been satisfied with, a person or something, then that's the time to change them, okay? As you're looking at your team members, think about what goals you have and what you're working on, because your team members should probably consist of folks who have expertise in those areas, right? You want them to give you suggestions and advice and help you out, right? I mean, that's what you're getting your team for, right? To be able to push you through the process
and make sure that you do get accredited. So your team members should have some expertise around areas that you're really concerned about or that you have as part of your goals. Okay, so think about that as you're setting up those new team members if you're doing that. Systems being accredited this year, 2014, boy, what was I doing in 2014? I wonder, why did that come up? Okay, that's Freudian. I'm going to have to analyze that later. Okay, so next year in 2020, those systems that will be accredited do need to do the final report as well as their System Year 5 report, okay, System Yearly Update. So you have 2 reports to complete if you just got accredited or if you will be accredited this year. All of the systems are just doing their System Yearly Update for the current year that they're in, okay. General information. We accredited last year, 8 public systems and 13 private systems. They went to the board looked at them, they got accredited, so that's how many we have this year going through as year 1. The 13 privates were all advanced ed, I believe. With advanced ed, part of what we're doing is that the advanced ed process of improvement is what's being used to meet the requirements of KESA. It does not mean that they're not doing KESA. It means that their improvement process is the advanced ed process, which is being used to meet those requirements. There are a lot of improvement processes out there. Not only the improvement processes that we have with MTSS, KLN, Redesign, KESA. I mean, there are others out there, right? So it's about using an improvement process because it is a continuous improvement process and you need to use one. Our KESA regulations just came back from the Attorney General's office with a whole bunch of suggestions and questions and things like that. So that's being worked on by our legal department. And as soon as we have more finalization on that, we'll just keep updating you on that. This coming year, we have 30 systems that will be up for recommendations for accreditation. 15 public and 15 private. The 15 private, I believe 13 are advanced ed and 2 are doing the KESA process. One of them is a state school who is, I believe, is a school for the deaf, I think. And so the school for the deaf also has kind of their own improvement process. So they're using that to meet KESA requirements. When I say this, I want you to know and think about that the Accreditation Review Council looks at all of these systems and they're having to really become aware of all the different improvement processes that are out there in order to determine then, as they're reading these reports, are they meeting our state board goals? Are they really improving? Are they showing growth? So it's really a lot of work on our Accreditation Review Council. This year we did a 20% random review of the systems. It was twofold, really. One was to find out whether or not how up to date everyone was on their reports and what they were doing. The second reason was to help us define the type of trainings that we needed to put out there. What was the information that we needed to share with both chairs and systems based on what we were seeing with those reports? For example, one of the things that became very clear and is becoming clear also with our Accreditation Review Council as they're reviewing reports is that we use a lot of acronyms. Okay, and even though we're all in education, we don't know what all those acronyms are. So I'm letting you know now that if you do have acronyms, I'm not saying go back and change them, but what I am saying is that this year, just make sure and tell your chairs, or if you're a chair, make sure that you at least spell it out once, okay? And even if you use the acronym later. I mean, standard kind of practice, but they're reading these reports, and even we were reading these reports, and we didn't know, so what is this program? What can I expect about this program? How do I know, right? The other thing is that we're also getting a whole bunch of lists of programs. So we say, what are you using, or what kind of interventions are you using, and these kind of stuff. And so what we end up getting is this list of programs or that you have in your schools, but we're not getting what impact that is having on the board goals and changes in your system. It's not about a list. You know, you can give us the list until it's clear, whatever, it doesn't really matter. If we can't tell, and I say we, meaning the ARC, who then will be doing the recommendation to the state board, if they can't tell what kind of impact that has and whether it's working, they probably will say, we can't review this report or something, okay? So, and I might be calling you at the last minute saying, what does this mean? And we want to try to avoid those kind of things. So if you can, just do that. Once we're still in the process of putting all the information, analyzing it, and putting it in a report format. And as soon as we do that, we'll put that up on our website so that you can have an idea of what we found and what kind of things you can do to improve the system, the reports. Any questions on this? We are doing Zoom support meetings. We decided not to do phone calls. We decided to do them through Zoom because what we have experienced is there were a lot of times that we wanted to show something or give something out. And we talked about it, and then it was through listservs, and people were saying, well, when we're going to get this? And we couldn't show it at that time. So we want to be able to show you enhancements to the KISA system and other things as we're meeting, and just give you firsthand view of what's going to be out there. So our first Zoom support meeting is October the 8th, and I do have a copy of all these trainings on the table on one sheet, okay? So I didn't go by to give it out, but if you want one, you can pick one up from there. We did send out the information through the listservs, and we'll try to send those out on a regular basis as well with any update that might be needed for it. So our first one is October 8th. This will be from 1:30 to 2:30, and on that list we have the Zoom link for it. We also have our system trainings, right? Yep. We're going to have regional systems trainings, and those will be through our service centers. Service centers have been collaborating with us to help us as we put these in place. Those will begin in November, November 6th. I will tell you that this systems training, we are collaborating with our research and evaluation team, and they will be providing some information about how do you evaluate your improvement process for improvement. How do you do that analysis and evaluation? And then we have asked that you come as a team and bring your data so that we can then, after that presentation, maybe try to go a little bit more in depth with your data specifically. Okay. First one is November 6th in Lawrence North Greenbush. Is that right? Is that the right way to say that? Lawrence, okay. These are also up on our website. If you forget, you can go to our website, and they're located there, all these trainings. Chair training will begin on November 18th is a 9 to 2. It's also, we're going to be looking at what we found on those reports, how to write your reports, how to ask the questions about your data to your team. So one thing is the team looking and giving you information. The other thing is how the chair provides the support and how do they phrase those questions to get that. So that's what we're going to be focusing on during this presentation. Hands-on, we'll be having samples and things so that you can work on that hands-on if you're a chair. KISA application. we have done some enhancements right now. As it pertains to the systems, we have put tabs up on top to help navigate a little bit better. The system reports are finally all there, broken out individually. If you wanted, and you're still a year within the first cycle of your accreditation or whatever, remember we had that guidance document or whatever. Well, it was uploaded, so we put a tab, so if you wanted to take a look at it, you can. We've had requests for that, so we ended up doing that. So those are the workbooks that were completed. The OVT reports, if you looked at your OVT reports, it used to run in a whole big, I mean, you would go in the PDF, you would have to dig down to it. And if you were a year 3, like now, year 1 and year 2 probably wasn't even completed or whatever. You're year 5, right? Year 1 and not, because you entered as the year 3. So then you had to really dig down, and that also became problematic for our Accreditation Review Council. So we have separated those. Now you can find them individually, and there's a tab for that. We also been asked for an artifact upload. We have put that in place. I will tell you I'm very concerned about that. Because I think our general tendency is to put, how does that saying go? Sink and whatever? I've always messed that up. Okay, like to put everything in there, and that's not the point for that. The point for that is to be able to, maybe your improvement plan you want to put up there because the ARC doesn't see it and it's just your team that sees it, right? So if you wanted to do that, you can probably do that. If you had any specific things that you wanted to show your team at that time, you can put it in there as well for them or for the ARC. The ARC can go in at any time to take a look at all of that. But we're going to try right now, it's open, and it does have identification. Is this for your visiting team or if this is for your ARC? Because at some point in time, schools might get conditionally accredited, and there will be some recommendations about what is needed. And so if a school got conditionally accredited and the ARC wanted some information, then that could be uploaded just for the ARC. Nobody else would see it, it would be just for the ARC. We will eventually put something on like suggestions of what would be there, but just don't put everything in there. I mean, that's not the point. We don't want this to become the notebooks we had in the past, okay? Make sure you don't do that. That's not the point. Questions about this? We will show these sections at the first Zoom meeting. We'll go through the KSDE application and actually show you what it looks like. One of the other things that we have improved on or enhanced or included, which is not on here, is the whole ARC process. Right now, the ARC has been doing these recommendations on paper, and so now they're going to be using actually the KSDE system to do those recommendations, and then through that, notifications will go out to the systems that are being accredited about their status and things that are happening. And we'll show some of that as well. Our Accreditation Review Council, that's the advisory group for us. There are 25 members. They met on September 25th. They're the ones that do your review for accreditation. They met on September 25th, and on that meeting, they finalized the accreditation criteria, which we will also show you on the 8th. And after we show you on the 8th, it will be placed online and distributed. So you'll have the first view of it, whoever's in the Zoom meeting, and then it'll be distributed. They also worked with our state board to improve how they're writing the reports for the executive summary. So part of what we end up telling systems is, or even your chairs, when you're writing your reports as a system, you're writing it for your chair, right, and the OVT. because you're trying to give them information about what's happening. The OBT team is writing their report not only to inform you and give you some feedback, but also to inform the ARC. Okay? So when the ARC writes their report, they're writing it for the board. And the board, and they need to make sure that the board feels comfortable with what is written and that they can really determine that this system is improving. Data, which we will be giving, we're going to be looking at the building report card and give that information back to the board along with the chair executive summary. And they will be looking at that and so that it could provide them with more information as they look at what the ARC recommendations are. This year, when we sent those systems to the board asked or said, really, are we going to get all systems being accredited? When are we going to find systems if they're being conditionally accredited? And the reason that they said that was because we still say, you, until year 2022, you can move within the cycle, right? You just can't go past, you just can't be accredited by 2023 unless you have already done that 1 year of your cycle, the first year of your cycle. So I'm letting you know now that the ARC will not be pushing back or asking systems to move back. They're going to take and look at the system as the information comes into them. They have been making those suggestions to some systems, but they won't be doing that anymore. The expectation is that the systems, when they come in to be reviewed for accreditation by the ARC, that all I's are dotted, T's are crossed, and all the ducks are in a row. Okay. So if you need to change, or if you know, if you're a chair and you think you have a system that needs to change, do it prior to it coming to the ARC. We do have several openings and positions on the ARC. We have had some people that have moved, retired, etc. So we do have some openings, and we are expanding the ARC right now from 18 members to 25 members. So we will be giving information to the board, asking them to make suggestions. If you're interested, just let us know, okay? We're not really sending out nominations the way we have been doing with the Accreditation Advisory Council. And we will provide training, so. The Accreditation Advisory Council, they met on September 9th. One of the biggest things that they're really working on right now is that alignment of our KSDE rubrics with the redesigned principles, so that there won't be that confusion that currently exists on whether or not they're doing KSDE redesign. Okay, so with these rubrics, hopefully a system who has all their schools in redesign could then just turn that rubric to where the redesign principles are at and see how it aligns with KSDE. On the other hand, those systems that are not or don't have schools in redesign can then look at it from the KSDE perspective and see how they're meeting some of those redesign principles. All right? We're hoping that this will be finalized by middle of 2020. So that systems can be using it then the following year. But if you're currently, with what you're using, we're not asking you to go back, okay? We're not asking you to drop and then go back. No start overs, if you will. Currently, there's also some openings. A listserv message went out with a survey. We've been getting some. If you haven't seen it, take a look at the listserv or contact David Barnes, who's in charge of the Accreditation Advisory Council, and we'll be getting those together. Here's our contact list. Of course, we have Michelle Miller, which is our director. Oh, there she goes.
think there are several of you in the room who are not chairing systems. Please take on that opportunity. It's not difficult. Takes maybe 2 days out of your school time, maybe one for the visit and maybe a half to support that system, etc. We need you. We need your expertise because you folks have a lot of knowledge in this continuous school improvement process. So I'm begging you, please. We need good folks like you, Cindy Couchman. I know you're chairing 14M already. So the other thing that you may not have heard her say specifically was, if you're chairing one of those systems and they're in year 3 and you're not feeling good about that, because I've had some conversations with a couple of you about that, encourage them to visit with us, encourage them to be intentional about the work. Sooner or later, that movement back, forth, whatever, is you heard Jeanette talk about that. Don't get to that ARC meeting with a system that's not in a good space, okay? Because you just don't want to be there. That we've got lots of stop gaps in play for that not to happen. Remember year 3, which is where most of you are, you should be data collecting, 3, 4, and 5, which means you should have really tight, lean, mean goals that you can data collect around, right? Okay, and then the other thing that I would tell you too is the district leadership, building leadership team piece, that's highly important. She talked about focus groups. That's who those people are, plus they can be in addition to that group as well. So I'm really starting to dig this continuous school improvement process stuff, but it won't be as effective and intentional without the help of all of you. We can't do it all. So in your system, be intentional. As a support person, be intentional. And if you're not one of those people, either serving on a team or as a chair, please take on that opportunity. All right? So sorry to interrupt you, Jeanette. I just needed to reiterate a couple of things.
You wouldn't be you otherwise. I got used to that. So, yeah, thanks, Michelle. The only other thing that I will tell you is that we are looking at those reports that we put out there for you to complete the yearly updates and things that we have chairs to complete. This year, we have our compliance piece that we're doing internally. I just thought it's foolish for us to ask you whether you're in compliance when we're the ones that collect a lot of that information. There might be some areas that might need to be either verified because we don't collect the information, particularly some of the new things around mental health and if dyslexia comes around and things like that. That might still be there until we find a way that we can collect it internally. But we're going to go ahead and collect that, and then once we collect that from our staff, it will be placed for the chair to have. So I really think that at some point in time, that question about are you in compliance might be leaving, because we know that. So why are we asking for something that we already know? Okay. We're working on that change. This year we'll see what happens with our compliance collection, and then we'll know what we can do with those questions. Any comments or questions that you have? I wouldn't think so. I gave you enough opportunity, right after each slide. Okay, so don't hesitate to call us. We're there to help you and serve you. So please give us a call if you need anything. Thank you. Amanda?
Thank you. So Jeanette, I was curious. So I took a look at the Billboard Top 100 for 2014, and I would suspect that you, like many of us, were dancing along to Shake It Off by Taylor Swift because it was on there. And I know that I have the coveted last spot before the end of the day. So while I set up my PowerPoint, if you could all stand up, stretch a little bit, shake off any nervous energy, I'd appreciate it. All right. I did not say that it would be a long, extended break, so I hope that you're all feeling good. There we go. Excellent. So I am here today to talk to you about two main things. The first, I would suspect that many of you are, I'm hopeful that many of you are aware that this is a really special time for early childhood in Kansas, and that we've got an opportunity, if we get it right this year, to really chart our state's future direction in this area. The second will be around the ASQ, and we'll have some conversation about where we're at right now and how we can inform what that looks like moving forward. You have the opportunity to go to the KSDE website and navigate to find this information, or you can go to twitter.com and search for the hashtag KSED. Oh, no worries. You can go to Twitter, and about an hour ago, under the KSED hashtag, I tweeted a couple of ways for you to share feedback online that might be really helpful, and I would really appreciate that you would take the time to go there and to answer some of the surveys and some of the opportunities for sharing feedback that we're sharing today, because we really do care about what you have to say and what you think, and we hope that you will engage in this process to shape where we're going. So, kind of quick show of hands, I would bet that we've got maybe varying degrees of knowledge in the room or understanding in the room. Is there a secret to the clicker? Oh. Interesting. Fair enough. I can see it here, but not there. Well, if somebody might come mess with the clicker, that'd be helpful. So I would suspect that I'm hopeful that many of you are aware, kind of quick show of hands, if you've heard something vague about like early childhood in Kansas this year, state strategic planning, community engagement sessions, if any of that is ringing a bell, would you mind raising your hand? All right, so we've got some. Some of what we've learned this year is that we've got opportunity as a state to maybe better amplify. We think that we're getting the message out, but sometimes there's a whole lot going on, and so it can be hard. I know that all of us are aware that we've got leadership in some really key places in the state, at the state level, that mean that we are primed to move early childhood forward in a big way. Between our State Board of Education setting a vision around our kindergarten readiness goal, between our governor, between our legislature, at the state level, we've got some key people in some key places who have identified early childhood as a priority. Thank you, Eric. And we've got a whole lot of local communities, too, that have been leading in this area in a big way for a long time. And so this year, we got really lucky in that we thought that the state was ready to put together a comprehensive vision around how we get to this goal. Because we know that it's a big multi-sector issue. It's something that involves a variety of partners. It's something that's going to take a lot of work. And so we really wanted to do that. And then we got lucky in that we had the opportunity to get some federal grant funding to be able to take the plans that we had and really scale them up. And so this year, we've been out visiting with Kansans as part of an opportunity to develop a statewide needs assessment for early childhood. So behind me, between May and August-ish, we were out in over 30 communities having community engagement sessions, and we got to see many of you there, and we really appreciated the work that you did to help publicize those and make those a success. And more than 1,300 Kansans came to share, here's what's going really well in our community, here's what our vision is for early childhood, and here's where we would like to go. Because we wanted to get a good sense directly from Kansans what they had to say. And we knew that perhaps not everybody would want to come to a community engagement session and be able to share that with peers or in public. And so we also worked to collect stories, asking Kansas families directly, tell us about a time when your family or a family you know was either thriving or just barely surviving. And then tell us a little bit more about why that was the case. Because we wanted to make sure that we were getting a really good cross-sample of Kansans, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing some targeted follow-up for Kansans who might not typically have the opportunity to participate in these kinds of events. And we're really proud to say that we had at least one Kansan from every single county in the state participate in that. We've had over 2,000 Kansans share those stories. What I'm trying to say is we did a whole bunch of work to engage a whole bunch of people, because we know that if we're trying to get to the big, bold vision that we have for early childhood, we're really we want to be able to say, this is what Kansans have told us, and we feel pretty confident that this is where Kansans want to go. We didn't stop with just those two methods of collecting information. We also sent out surveys to districts. We went into childcare facilities to do a facilities scan to get a sense of what the physical infrastructure and stock of some of our childcare facilities are in the state. We polled childcare and early childhood professionals about their professional development needs. We did some other stuff too. We hosted parent cafes. we collected a whole lot of information, and we hosted visiting sessions where we went to targeted groups, think like a local board of directors or a local nonprofit partner, to be able to get their feedback. All in all, over 6,000 Kansans to date have engaged in one way, shape, or form to help give us information about where we're at right now. Because we had a pretty unique opportunity this year to really do some research and really dig in deep and say, okay, we've heard from Kansans that this early childhood thing is important, but let's get a little bit more detail. Let's understand in some more depth where we need to go. So if you have gone to Twitter, the first link that I posted earlier today is this kschildrenscabinet.org/share. And what we're doing right now is putting this information back out and asking Kansans, okay, here's a lot of the research that we've heard. Now, what would you like us to do about it? What could an individual do? What could a community do? And what should the state do? And as we are crafting the state strategic plan that's going to address the findings of this needs assessment, we are looking directly at what Kansans are telling us because we're getting a lot of good feedback in that way. I'm going to give you the cliff notes of each of these pieces. If you do go to the Kansas Children's Cabinet website, there's a whole wealth of information on there. There's webinars from every other week. There's lots of reports, lots of stuff. But in short, we walked away with two key understandings. One is that geography really matters, that where you live in the state, it makes a big difference for the access to services that you have available, for what your experience is like. And there are also really big disparities in our state based on income, based on race, based on a whole lot of factors. So that's kind of key frame number one. Key frame number two is that a lot of the times basic needs just aren't being met, and that can really interfere with the family's ability to access other services or engage in the kind of activities that you would want to set young children up for success. So keep those two pieces in mind. And then for each of these themes, I'm going to give you the Cliff Note version of each. So as we looked across all these different pieces of information, these are the themes that really came through, whether we were talking to parents, whether we were looking at survey data, whether we were reviewing needs assessments. Finding one is around accessibility. So a lot of the times families just face barriers to getting what they need, whether that is based on cost, whether that's transportation, lots of different pieces. Finding two is around availability. Sometimes there just aren't the services available in the community that a family needs, whether that is mental health, whether that's early childhood, or whether that's like childcare, whether that's preschool. Sometimes we just have gaps in what's available. Three is around navigation. Sometimes we ask families to adopt a real connect the dots approach when they're trying to figure out what services are even exist, how they get connected to them, how they figure out what they qualify for, and get referred between services. Finding four is around collaboration and integration. In a lot of communities, there are some real efforts to be able to collaborate and work together, and a lot of the times these are one-off. We've got some examples of communities where you've really got the infrastructure and the partnerships that you need. All the key players are around the table, but a lot of the times it tends to be around particular initiatives, and stakeholders are expressing a real desire to maybe collaborate more effectively. The next finding is around workforce. As we're thinking about where we want to get with making services more accessible and more available, whether you're working in home visiting, childcare, preschool, whether you're working in early intervention, just about every field that we talked to said, gosh, we have a real problem right now finding the staff that we need to deliver these services. And then when you start to look at the data for demographics for childcare providers in the state, you start to say, wow, we really need to be addressing this quickly because otherwise we're going to be in a world of hurt. Next is around facilities. This is a place where we want to learn more, but we know that the communities oftentimes struggle to find facilities that are appropriate or adequate as they're seeking to expand, that sometimes those just aren't available. Systems alignment really refers to at the state level when there are particular, perhaps you're working with different regulations, perhaps you're working with different grants, perhaps they don't all align as well as they might. And here I'm going to put in a particular plug. I'm going to give you a preview of some of the ways that we're going to be addressing this, but I would suspect that many of you have very, very, very specific examples that might relate to, say, I'm thinking about one that we heard a little while ago around childcare licensing and Head Start and vaccination records, and different timelines for when vaccination records need to be on file. We're looking for that level of specificity because as we're putting together groups, we're building a to-do list of specific regulations to work on. So we've heard loud and clear that this is a challenge. we would like some help generating that list of ideas for solutions. And if you go to this kschildrenscabinet.org/share, you have the opportunity in what can the state do to provide that in that level of detail. Finally, we wanted to make sure that we were really taking this opportunity to elevate the bright spots that we saw in all of these areas, because we didn't want people to walk away thinking, gosh, this is a lot to do, how are we going to overcome it? Part of this work is being able to identify the best practices, the bright spots, the places where this is working well, so that we can elevate those and show what's really working well. And so throughout all of these, we saw that as a theme, but we wanted to call it out specifically. I said that we would be that I wanted to preview a little bit of what's ahead. So all of this information is feeding into a state strategic plan. That's going to be done by the end of the year. We're in the process of drafting it now. And we've got a couple of ideas for what's going to be included. So this is a bit of a preview. These are recommendations that the Governor's Council on Education considered in September. They will, I believe, vote on them or discuss them further when we meet next in October. Governor Kelly has included a committee focused on early childhood as part of that work. And we've been tasked with, we're not just the early childhood subcommittee, we're the universal early childhood committee. So we have been tasked with thinking boldly. Recommendation 1, we heard something that I would imagine is maybe not surprising, that a lot of the times there just aren't the resources available. We can all blend and braid and be creative until we're blue in the face, but you know, at a certain point you just need more dollars in the system to be able to get to the goals that you're trying to achieve. A lesson that we've learned, or something that we've heard from other states, is that a good strategy to consider is the establishment of a statewide public-private partnership that could serve as the vehicle to accept private dollars that could then be matched with state or federal dollars to be able to multiply the impact of that investment. When we're at the local level, something that we see and hear a lot is that we've got great philanthropies, great local organizations that are doing this really well. And we've seen some other states, specifically Nebraska, Oklahoma, that have been able to scale this statewide. So we are recommending that Kansas consider establishing that kind of 501c3 type partnership. Second, I mentioned the regulations earlier, and I saw a couple smiles in the room. Kansas is supposed to have something called an Early Childhood Advisory Council, a body that is tasked under federal Head Start law with addressing some of these issues. And something that we've identified is that this is a real gap. Kansas doesn't have one of these right now. We're one of just 5 states in the country that doesn't. There's kind of a long, interesting history as to why that's the case. We would like to reestablish that, to be able to reestablish a work group that's tasked specifically with working through the regulatory barriers or the regulatory challenges that occur, so that when you have a challenge or an issue in a particular area, you have a place to send it that is maybe a little more coordinated or streamlined than just kind of scattershot guessing which agency is responsible and then having us work through that. And then once we do work through that issue, we would like to be able to formalize that a bit and to be able to make it so once we work through an issue in one place, we can maybe write it down and remember it, so that when the next community is working through the same issue, there's an easy place to go to check that out. So those are 2 of the recommendations that we think will address a couple of these issues. And so I saved a little bit of time here because I'm interested in your thoughts. And this is what you have the opportunity to enter in on the kschildrenscabinet.org/share. But I wanted to open it up. You know, are there any burning questions as you think about the needs assessment findings? Are there any things that you really hope that communities consider doing or that the state consider doing as we look to the next couple of years? A different way of framing this is, you know, if you had a magic wand and you could do anything you wanted in Kansas in the area of early childhood, what would it be? I see some nods. Thank you. All right. Well, you have the opportunity to think on that because this is really our opportunity. You know, if not now, with the resources that we have available, with the leaders that we have available, when are we going to, as a state, highlight and say, you know, this is what I want, this is what we want to see. So it's a good piece to be thinking on. we'll be doing some work to think on this together next week on Monday. So we're hosting the Governor's Symposium on Early Childhood as a part of this work. We are at capacity for that event in Wichita, but there is a virtual option, and there will be lots of tweeting and other opportunities to get and stay engaged. And we'll be bringing together stakeholders to work through some of these issues and do action planning and build on some of the bright spots that we heard and hear from some experts from around the country who can give us some ideas for what the state might do. So we have that option to attend virtually. On November 5th, we'll be submitting an application for some federal grant funding. This is not like universal preschool federal grant funding. This is infrastructure, computer systems, things that the money can go away after 3 years and it's okay kind of funding. And we are working hard with our partners at the Kansas Department of Health and Environment, the Department for Children and Families, the Children's Cabinet and Trust Fund, and many other agencies and non-state entity partners to be able to develop that application. So we're really excited about that, and it's going to be a busy couple of weeks, really, not months. And so that's essentially what's ahead for this work. By the end of the year, we will have big documents where people will be able to go and download and read the needs assessment and the strategic plan. And then we're really committed to making sure that this is not something that lives on a shelf and gathers dust somewhere in Topeka. We're really ready to put this into action. You can stay up to date really easily at kschildrenscabinet.org/early childhood. The second link that I posted on Twitter is an email sign-up form where about every other week we send out an email update that has all the information that you need to stay up to date. The second piece that I wanted to visit with all of you about is the kindergarten readiness snapshot. And I know that all of you have been engaged in this work, and that as we're coming to the end of our second year of statewide implementation, that perhaps we have some perspective after 2 years of implementation, and we're at a really good place as a state to consider where we go next with this data. So data is due on October 10th, and we'll be pulling that together and sharing it with the state board and sharing it publicly. And as we're thinking about what's ahead, the third link that I post today is a survey that I really hope that you take the time to complete, because it asks for feedback from stakeholders about everything from are the items and the data that you're gathering useful and relevant, to when do you think the collection window should be for kindergarten students, to what strategies could you use to better engage kids and families. I'm curious, does anybody have any feedback or any thoughts about the kindergarten readiness snapshot and how that's worked this year in your second year of statewide implementation? Is there a goal on percentages completed? Thank you. We are hoping for, as we were looking at the data from last year, we're hoping for a statewide goal of 75%. We know that there is real variance among districts in what the participation rates would be, and we think that the participation rate is something that's really important, and I'll explain a little bit more why in a minute. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's good. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that there's some, so the comment was around, the value of this tool for 3- and 4-year-olds, that there's time to have interventions or have other work together with parents and teachers to help children prepare to enter kindergarten prepared for success. As we were thinking about this tool, I know that you're all really aware that the ASQ goes all the way down to birth. And so as we're thinking about our community-wide infrastructure around early childhood, there's a lot of opportunity to be partnering with health departments, area childcare providers, preschool programs, so that we've got all our teachers and all our early childhood providers speaking a common language and working together with parents as they visit about their children's development. Our agesandstages.com website has a lot of resources. If you get down to the wire and you're struggling with data entry, you can certainly feel welcome to call us. This is a good place to go. It's got lots of screenshots, videos, other pieces that are helpful. And as I mentioned, we have that feedback form. And a particular piece to keep in mind, we wanted to make sure that this is accessible if you have had parents who had really strong feedback around the ASQ, or if you have other stakeholders who maybe didn't want to complete the entire survey, but might wanted to share just a little bit of feedback. We intentionally made it so that the only question that's required is the district, so that we can get a sense for how balanced the feedback is that we're receiving. And so while we certainly hope that people will answer all the questions, if you choose, there is an open feedback form or an open feedback box at the very beginning. And folks can feel welcome to type in anything that they'd like to share there and then just scroll to the end to make sure they submit it. The last piece that I wanted to share on this, and this will be in the PowerPoint, you know, I read something a couple weeks ago that I really enjoyed, and I enjoyed it so much that I thought that I would share it with all of you as I was reflecting on the ASQ for this year. New America put out their early childhood or early education team put out 2 reports that are all about the transition into kindergarten and thinking about how we can make the most of that really critical time. And this first one, moving into kindergarten, is a good, quick, easy read that looks at a couple of districts and the strategies that they're implementing. And it focuses on 4 key strategies. It looks at the opportunities to share data between early childhood, preschool and childcare teachers and kindergarten teachers about individual students. It looks at the opportunities to engage parents in meaningful ways that maybe go beyond sending a brochure home once. It looks at how schools can target students and provide activities for students that get them in the building, that are able to target students who haven't been able to access preschool. And it also looks at the ways that communities can ensure that there's shared professional development and shared expectations between early childhood teachers and elementary teachers. And you know, as I was reading this, I was thinking, gosh, the ASQ, well, while it wasn't highlighted in this, it really does provide a bit of an opportunity to tackle all of these pieces. I mean, we, I think, really like to look at the data and think, gosh, this is going to tell us how, like, this gives us a good snapshot in where kids are at the day that they take it. And that's certainly a good frame to be thinking about this particular data. But it's also, you know, as we're thinking about how we collectively get families ready for kindergarten and get kids ready for kindergarten and prepare. You know, it's not just about preparing the classroom. It's not just about making sure that parents know, like, the procedures and where the school is. It's a whole process to get kids ready. And that getting ready element of it, I think the ASQ gives us a lot of opportunity to use a good, high-quality tool to be able to create some opportunities in our community for shared professional development, to be able to have some really meaningful conversations between teachers and parents really early about a child's development. So an interesting thought. It was a quick, easy read, and I really do recommend it if you're looking for something to add to your reading list. This is just some data about where we're at as we look to get to that statewide participation that we're hoping to. I know it's really small, so you'll be able to see it elsewhere, but we're on track, and we feel like this year is going a bit more smoothly maybe than last. There we go. My last plea for all of you, just because this is something that I'm saying wherever I'm at. We are really hoping, we know that many of you wear multiple hats. We are really hoping that we get some really good data this year in the kids collection system around parents as teachers and around the Kansas preschool pilot. We know that those are not, we know that whether or not you enter the data in the kids system, since they're not per child expenditures, that doesn't necessarily affect the funding that you get, but we would really love to not need to implement any other data collection systems. We'd really love to be able to just look at the kids' data and say, these are the kids served, these are demographics, these are where they're at. That would be incredibly helpful for us. So if any of you are in any way connected to people who administer either of these programs or administer data collection systems, please do make sure that if you have a Kansas Preschool Pilot grant, if you have a Parents as Teachers grant, that those kids are entered into kids because, you know, as we are justifying the funding, it is really helpful to be able to answer the question, how many kids are served by the funds? So that's my PSA. Tell your friends. Tell people who aren't your friends. We would really love this data. Do we have any general early childhood thoughts or questions? I'm assuming that Brad is closing us out.
Thanks, Amanda. So one thing I will, just a couple closing comments. One of our goals that we think will really help you, is at some point we want to move to where you do not have to apply for slots, that if the kid shows up and they meet 4-year-old at-risk requirements, you just serve them and you get funded. I mean, you don't apply for kindergarten slots. If you had 20 extra kindergartners show up, you're going to educate them, you're going to fund them. The problem right now is K through 12 is base state aid. Early childhood is an appropriation of a set of money. We want to get to the point where, and we think we're getting close, but to the point where you no longer fill out a 4-year-old at-risk application requesting certain slots, because you guys always request way more than the money you'll pay for. Then on September 20th, there's like 1,500 less than what. So we're always trying to back into it. So we hope in the near future, as in next year or the following, that if a 4-year-old shows up, they meet the at-risk criteria, you enroll them, we audit. If you're serving, you get funded. Because we will never get where we want to go if you have to apply to serve a number of kids. We want to get to the point where it's hard to build a program when you're trying to do it with an additional 5 kids every year, if that. So that is one of our goals at the state level. You build your program. If they show up, you support them, educate them, you're going to get funded. A couple other things. Just remember, the first Wednesday of every month, we put out lunchtime hot topics. We changed a little bit this year. When we post those on my website, they're broken down by content. That way you don't have to watch the whole thing if you're looking for a specific. So you can go to my website and they're on there and just click on whatever topic and you can view it, share it without having to share the whole lunchtime. Anything else? I knew there was one other thing I wanted to tell you, but I don't remember, so it was just critically important, which is probably why I forgot it. Drive safely. It looks like rain's moving into the area. If you're heading west, you'll drive out of it in about 2 hours. And again, let us know what we can do to help you.